be here for much long because of...
Alright, I'm just getting ready here. Good to see you, WZ. Hey, let me know if, for some reason, my monitor's not showing my face up there, but I think I'm good. So, glad to be here, everyone. Finally got a day to prepare for a video. This will probably be my last one. Oh, no. DJ Keel. I mean, Green New Veal. It's a pun. Veal is baby calf. And since we're talking about eating babies, I thought it was a clever pun. I don't know. I've been inspired by Bob's Burgers to try to come up with clever puns for the title of all my live streams. So here we are. So if there's any trouble with the audio or video, please let me know. I'm working with a new system here, so but I think it should go. So yeah, we're here to talk about climate change hysteria, the Green New Deal, and eating babies. That's the topic of today's video. We'll also get into, depending on how long I go, I don't know, sometimes I go an hour, sometimes it's like 4 hours, but we'll see what happens. So we might talk about some impeachment garbage and Biden-Ukraine scandal. But for those of you who haven't heard, an excellent troll went to an AOC town hall and was very distraught with the fact that climate change is going to kill us all like totally soon. And so she had what I would consider a logical extension to the climate hysteria and things like the Green New Deal, which is that we need to start eating babies. Now, this troll is just excellent. It's fantastic in so many ways because what makes it amazing is so many people, even on the right, couldn't tell that it was a troll. I kind of knew it was a troll immediately, and I was tweeting last night that I was quite confident that it was a troll. But anytime someone's using sarcasm or satire, it works best if you don't have to explain yourself, and it certainly works best if it's believable enough that other people aren't sure if it's satire. So I thought that this was amazing. If you don't mind, I will play the video for you in case you haven't seen it. Let me see if I can do this. Get this set up for you. Here we are.
Going to be here for much long because of the climate crisis. We only have a few months left. I love that you support the Green Deal, but it's not getting rid of fossil fuel. It's not going to solve the problem fast enough. A Swedish professor saying we can eat dead people, but that's not fast enough. So I think your next campaign slogan has to be this: we got to start eating babies. We don't have enough time. There's too much CO2. All of you're a pollutant. Too much CO2. We have to start now, please. You are so great. I'm so happy that you're really supporting the Green Deal, but it's not enough. Even if we would bomb Russia, we still have too many people, too much pollution. So we have to get rid of the babies. That's a big problem. Just stopping.
Notice how AOC and all of her supporters here, they're, okay. Like, they kind of understand, like, I'll give them this benefit of the doubt. They're probably not on board with eating babies, but this is totally believable for a supporter of their movement. They're like, okay, yeah, you're right. Maybe bomb Russia. Yeah, maybe we have to start eating dead people meat, but eating babies. And they're all just listening. Now, can you imagine if this would occur at, like, a conservative rally? If someone would stand up and be like, we need to eat babies. People would be like, boo, shut up, get out. But not at this rally. Not at an AOC rally. Oh, okay. That's an interesting idea. You've gone a little further than we care to admit right now. We'd like to abort all the babies. We'd like to eat dead people. But eating babies right now, let's start with the Green New Deal and then we'll get there. This troll's just amazing. And she's hilarious. And she throws in that bombing Russia won't be enough. Which is brilliant. Which I'll get to... why that is the logical extension of these climate hysterics, that we need to start bombing people that pollute. But the fact she says Russia, which is clearly a stab at the Russia hoax that was going on with the collusion narrative. So just absolute brilliance. Let's let her finish up.
Having babies is not enough. We need to eat the babies. And this is very serious. Please give a response.
Thank you. We'll go ahead. Okay. No, we'll go ahead.
it's so no. Yeah, no. Thank you. So I think so one of the things that's very important to us is that we need to treat the climate crisis with the urgency that it does present.
Right.
Luckily, we have more than a few months. We do need to hit net zero in several years. But I think we all need to understand that there are a lot of solutions that we have and that we can pursue, and that if we act in a positive way, there's space for hope. We are never beyond hope. Okay.
It's so great. I love it. I love comedy, and I love when people could use it to make their point. This was phenomenal work. So imagine this, right? Take a conservative issue. Take, like, economics, right? The GDP needs to do better. We need to raise wages for the middle class. We need to cut food stamps and welfare, right? Imagine that someone stands up super distraught and is like, we need to kill poor people. Go into inner city neighborhoods and rural communities and start killing the poor people. Do you think that the conservative speaker would be like, yes, it's a very serious issue, but we can't lose hope. There's other things we can do. They would be like, that's appalling. What are you talking about? This is how far we've come with these crazy climate hysterics and these people on the left. I mean, they're absolutely ridiculous. Nothing is too insane anymore. Now, again, I think I'm a good judge of being able to see through this stuff. I knew immediately it was a satire. There were so many signs that it was a troll. Like the shirt's a pretty good sign. That you actually made a shirt that says save the planet, eat babies. Pretty good sign that it's satire. The throwing Russia in there, that's great. That's a good sign that it's satire. But it's hard. What can AOC say? Is this that much more ridiculous than, like, watching people at anti-Trump rallies go, we know that Trump's going to lock gay people up in internment camps? What are you talking about? What about Trump has he ever done that's remotely close to that? He flew the gay flag. He was the first Republican candidate to fly the gay flag at the convention. He went out publicly and said to other countries, we're going to stop doing business deals with them if they criminalize homosexuality. But still, you have these people, they truly believe it. They believe Trump's Hitler. Now remember, the same crew that will tell you constantly that Trump's rhetoric is leading to violence. Oh, people could take Trump's rhetoric seriously and they can go out and do crazy stuff. Those same people tell you that we only have 10 years to solve the climate crisis or we're all dead. And they tell you that Trump's literally Hitler. And they tell you that ICE agents are Nazis and that ICE detention centers are concentration camps. And that all Trump supporters are racist and they're 10-tooth. All of that good stuff, right? That's what they tell. But they never say that leads to hysterics or that could incite violence. And what I've been saying all along, look, one, you go back and you check everything I've written online, everything that I've done in any of my videos. I have never once blamed the Democrats for some extremist going out and shooting people up or anything like that. Ever. Not once. When the Bernie supporters shot up Steve Scalise to them, I specifically said, this is not indicative of Bernie. It's not indicative of Democrats. Every party has crazy extremists that do stuff. Yet every single time someone who's perceived as on the right goes out and kills people, it's Republicans' fault. It's Trump's fault. It's Trump supporters' fault. Even like the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, right? That guy shoots up a synagogue and he writes in his manifesto, I hate Trump. Trump sold out white people. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Blah, blah, blah. That was still Trump's fault somehow. So I'm not saying that AOC's rhetoric leads to like crazy stuff, that she's responsible for crazy stuff. You can say what you want, and at the end of the day, it's up to individuals. If you act poorly as an individual or you enact violence, you are ultimately responsible. But they are definitely, the media and the Democrats and the people like AOC are cultivating a culture in which insanity is going to prevail. Not only just on this issue, not only just like I was saying with calling Trump a Nazi, but denying science, making us deny facts. And I don't mean denying science like stuff like climate change that we could talk about, which I am going to get into the specifics of what I think about climate change in this video. But I mean denying science like we have to pretend that biological males don't have a competitive advantage to women or there's no difference. That leads to real world consequences. If you look up the story of Fallon Fox, who was a man who converted to a woman and fights in the UFC or in the UFC type mixed martial arts and shattered a woman's orbital socket. It's just, cow farts ending the world, that type of stuff. So let's look exactly like this was clearly a troll. AOC shouldn't be left off the hook. Neither should the people in that audience. They believed that this could be a supporter. They weren't sure that that was a troll when they're being let out. And that's clear by AOC's reaction and her tweets afterwards. Oh, we thought maybe it was just a mentally disturbed person. You're the same group that's telling children in schools that we have people like Greta Thunberg and all these kids in schools, elementary schools, crying because they think they're dead in 10 years. So clearly they believe that someone could come to this conclusion, that we need to eat babies. I mean, it's the same party that's okay with aborting babies. And they think, this is not a new argument. This is, there was a professor named Malthus that was making this argument, I believe, back in the 1800s, right? And when I debated, you would talk about Malthusian arguments all the time. And the argument was, we would eventually reach population where the population would not be sustainable because in order to survive, it would need more resources than the earth could offer. And so therefore, people would make all sorts of arguments like wars now are good because it doesn't just kill 100,000 people now. All those people that would have had children within 5 generations, now you've stopped like 5 billion or 5 million people that would have been here. And so all sorts of heinous things have been suggested in the name of population control. And climate change is one of them. The irony, of course, is they contradict themselves with the argument. So, for example, if you know anything, one of the big environmentalist arguments back in like the 70s in the United States was that actually illegal immigration and mass immigration to the United States was terrible for the environment. Because this is a fact, poorer populations, and it has nothing to do with skin color or country of origin, that's not what I'm saying, but poorer people tend to exploit the environment more because you need a way to get cheap resources in order to sustain your life. So if we bring in a bunch of people that are desperately poor and don't have a skill set, they tend to be more damaging to the environment. And there used to be environmentalists that were like, look, we should work to control our population and we shouldn't be bringing people in because it leads to overpopulations in cities, which leads to environmental exploitation. Tucker got in a lot of crap because they're like, 3-4 months ago, he went down to kind of some of our natural parks, our national parks, that are like kind of deserts that are down towards the border, and they're just being torn apart by illegal immigrants and cartels and things like that. And people were like, oh, you're a racist. This is like environmental racism. No, it's just honesty. Let's not forget one of the biggest union labor leaders in the history of this country, Cesar Chavez. I mean, he used to round up Hispanic legal immigrants and other union members and go to the border and beat the crap out of people that were trying to cross because he looked at them like scabs. They were trying to take away union jobs, So these positions on the left don't add up. The idea that it's all just conservatives that have a problem with illegal immigration. There's all sorts of problems with illegal immigration, environmental concerns being one of them. But these same people will tell you, on one hand, we need to control the population because we don't want environmental exploitation. But on the other hand, when you see first world nations that have declining birth rates, what do they say? Well, we need to import new young people from different countries in order to sustain our older population. You can't have it both ways. Either it's damaging to the environment, and so we should try to limit our population, or we need to continue to grow our population or we won't be able to sustain the older people. Now the whole thing, the truth of the matter is the entire argument on both sides is garbage. Neither of them, to me, materially factor into any calculus. It's just more proof that the Democrats are disingenuous when they claim, oh, we're all about science. It's ridiculous. Now, let's talk specifically about the claims that people were making. I've heard 10 years from AOC. I've heard her say, we have 10 years to live. Then I've heard people interpret that as, no, she's saying if we don't get to zero emissions within 10 years, then it's too late and we're all dead within 100 years or so. I've heard people say 2 years. I've heard people say 10 months. I've heard people say 12 months. So I've heard all sorts of anywhere from, let's just say, a year to 10 years. That's how long we have to fix this problem or we're extinct. That's what I've heard. And so I said this 5-6 months ago. You can check my videos. When the first Green New Deal came out, in fact, before I leave here, I'll link my original video on the original Green New Deal that got released. One of the first things I said on it was, if you tell people over and over again your children and your grandchildren will be dead. The entire world will be destroyed if X policy isn't taken. And then they perceive people as voting against X policy. What are they going to do? By the same token, if you say that the Republican president is Hitler enough times, someone's going to take that seriously. And what do you do to Hitler? They say it all the time. Is it okay to punch a Nazi? I say no, it's not okay. Political violence is never justified. It's only justified if you are directly defending yourself in the moment. Period. That's it. That's the only time it's justified. Because otherwise, as soon as you justify political violence, then people use it as an excuse to go after anyone. That's exactly what we see Antifa doing. That's exactly what this punch a Nazi thing did. It wasn't just Antifa or academic people that were pushing it. So I did a big write-up on The Guardian. Pushed, well, okay, maybe it's not couth to punch a Nazi, but yes, we think sometimes you need to. And I was like, this is a mainstream outlet. How can they be suggesting this? You know what you're doing. You know what you're telling people. As soon as you say it's okay to punch a Nazi, then it's a short stone's throw away to say, by the way, all my political opponents are Nazis. Therefore, I'm justified in punching them. By the way, the same people that say words harm me. I can't use words because that's violence to them, but their actual physical violence to me is justified. Do you see? Kind of like how, Biden and Obama and all of that crew and the intel agencies can corruptly spy on Trump and investigate him for 3 years and do all sorts of shady criminal activities all around the world. But investigating them, that's a crime. Do you see how this works? Over and over, it's the same policy with these people on the left. And so with climate change, what did I say? I said, you've been telling people for so long, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. They're going to take extreme measures. Just look at the ICE detention centers. Now it's twice that we've had, the Antifa person there, 2-3 months ago? We had one day where activists raided an ICE facility and lowered the American flag. Remember that? And then the very next night, an Antifa person firebombed, tried to kill federal officers there. Why wouldn't they? They think they're doing the right thing. These are Nazis we're fighting. It's the same here. In debate, we used to talk about this all the time. It's hard to argue against people using facts. Sometimes they don't care about it because you have to put it and frame it in a way that they understand. So a lot of philosophical authors write about the idea that Mother Earth needs saved by the big privileged white man that's all these environmentalists is in itself kind of a sexist privilege type of thing. I don't know about all that. I prefer to think of it like George Carlin. If you go back and you watch George Carlin's stand-up, which I didn't agree with everything George Carlin said, but he was hilarious, so that covers all warts as far as I'm concerned. But he does his spiel on environmentalism, and he says, don't be fooled. The Earth will be fine. It'll kick humans off like a bad case of the fleas. It'll go on. So when people complain about this, what they're really saying is they want their situation to be more comfortable. And that's exactly it. So, they're putting up this situation where hysterical people, people are going to believe this and they're going to act accordingly. I have friends that I consider very intelligent, great people who, they truly believe within 100 years humanity's done. Truly believe that. And there's all sorts of implications. So I'll just go through a conversation I had with a great friend of mine. I said, you truly believe that we have 10 years or 12 years, and if we don't make a radical change, like ending fossil fuels, that we're all dead. Yeah, we'll be dead in 100 years. How confident are you? 90%, he says, or something to that degree. I said, okay. I was like, well, you're aware of the fact that the United States is, at best, 18% of the gas emissions. So let's take a country like India. India emits more CO2 than we do. The life expectancy of people in India has gone up in the past 30 years substantially. And the reason is because they have, albeit primitive, they finally have an infrastructure for energy. And if you look, the pictures in India, it's insane of what their electrical grid looks like. It goes down so often that most of them are using gas generators, which is some of the dirtiest and least efficient fuel that you could use. Nonetheless, even with that level of infrastructure, the life quality of these people has gone through the roof. Their life expectancy, their quality of life, all these things have gone through the roof. What point do we bomb India or tell them that they have to stop using fossil fuels because if they don't, we only have 10 years to live? let's take the bomb out of it, right? Let's just say, we say no more fossil fuels. We stop producing them. We convince Saudi Arabia to stop producing them, right? We convince the world to stop producing fossil fuels. Yeah, you'd have a few outliers that would still do it, like Russia would still try it, but there certainly won't be enough fuel for the people in India. How do we, the privileged Americans, tell these poor people in India, I'm sorry, you have to die. Sorry. Millions of you are going to die because we're going to end fossil. And that's just one country. This is true all around the world. If we ended fossil fuel consumption in the next 10 years, literally billions of people would die as a result. At least hundreds of millions. So how are you, the privileged person that would probably make it because you're in a country and you have enough wealth that your life would be a struggle compared to what it is now, but you'd make it probably. How do you have the right to tell these people that they deserve to die? What's up, Deb? And the answer I got from my friend, who I consider a compassionate, smart person, was, well, they're all dead anyways if we don't act. And so what my friend doesn't realize is what he just said was, I'm not certain that climate change will kill us all. I'm only 90%, but I'm willing to sign the death warrant of 1 billion people for my hunch. That's insane. That's not an evil person. That's not someone who's out there robbing or mugging people or, treating people like crap. That's my friend. That's a decent person. He's so convinced by the propaganda of climate change that he's willing to say, yes, I acknowledge that many people die. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. Would that many people die? Blah, blah, blah. We can have that argument. But my friend was operating under the assumption that those people would die, and it was still worth it. And that's how many people are. And so when someone takes that to the logic, you say this, how are we going to stop China? Here's the first thing that would happen. If we stop using fossil fuels, and if you listen to Bernie and AOC talk, this is what they say. I'll try to do as much justice as I can. Look, within that 10 years, we would be able to have investments set up for new types of energy technologies, which we'd totally be able to change the energy grid and the transportation grid. And so when we develop these new technologies, they will then be so cheap and so worth it that we would be able to basically give these technologies to the rest of the world, and they would use these technologies, which then would mean that the whole world would be using renewable energy. That, I believe, is the argument, but that's pie in the sky dreaming. No new technology is that profitable to begin with. Everything takes time to become more efficient and more profitable. That's why we see renewable energies are so expensive right now. The truth is the status quo is solving the situation. We are gradually shifting to cleaner fuels. In fact, under the Paris Climate Accord that we dropped out of, we're actually meeting our emission goals. So we were told, if you don't do the Paris Climate Accord, you're all dead. Well, even though we dropped out, we're meeting the goals of it, and they still say, well, now that's not enough. Right? So that's the argument they say. And so what really happens is, and everybody that knows anything about the energy sector knows this, places like Saudi Arabia and that, are pumping out this oil, what they'll do is anytime there's a push for green technology, they'll artificially subsidize the barrels of oil prices. And that way oil's so cheap and fossil fuels are so cheap that it no longer becomes profitable to invest in renewables. Do you understand how that works? So let's say, just hypothetically, and this is obviously a gross oversimplification, but you're an energy company in the United States and you see the price of gas and oil going up and up and up and up and up. At some point, it will reach a price where it costs so much for you to refine and get that oil that you want to start looking at alternatives. But the cheaper that product gets, the less likely you are to look at alternatives. Okay? What that's proof of is that we will gradually shift as things, and you factor in businesses aren't stupid, right? Businesses don't want the world to die. And this idea that it's going to be like that movie, The Day After Tomorrow, that just one day the world's going to die. That's not true. That's not what even their scientists are saying. They're saying it will be gradual. It could get exponentially worse, and you'll see sea levels rise and things like that. But as there becomes a movement for a demand for green energy, which we're seeing now, not because the government's pushing it, but because people say, hey, I have some extra income. I'm willing to pay a little extra more to have solar or wind or whatever it may be. That's a free market choice. And we see that it's gradually changing. We're reducing our CO2 levels, right? But that China's not. Neither's India, okay? And what would happen, just like right now, that investors in the United States, when the price of oil goes low, they choose not to invest in renewables. If the United States is forced to stop using fossil fuels because of something like the Green New Deal that AOC is pushing for, our energy prices will skyrocket. So the first thing that'll do is affect the poorest people the most. And every single one of these socialist policies, every single one, the burden's placed always on the middle and lower class. They might say, oh, we'll tax the rich. That's garbage. Simple mathematics tell you it's not enough. And if you don't believe me, listen to Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, because they're afraid to tell you the truth about even things like their Medicare for All. Will it increase taxes on the middle class? You actually save money. No. It's the same with this plan. Do you think that the rich, do you think that all the people in Hollywood, do you think that all the people in Silicon Valley, you think they care if they pay $8 a gallon for gas? You think they care if they have to pay $20 for a cheeseburger? It's you, it's the poor people. By the way, this ending meat thing, you know who that affects predominantly? Poor people. People that actually go to McDonald's, same with $15 minimum wage. People that go to places like McDonald's and get cheap burgers, you know who they are? It ain't the rich. It's disproportionately poor people. So when you raise the minimum wage at places like that, which forces those companies to raise the price of their products, that affects poor people. When you say we're going to punish and tax the crap out of meat, like Andrew Yang admitted, yes, we eventually want to tax meat so high that its consumption no longer exists. Well, guess what? It's expensive to eat things that aren't from factory farms. That's not to say that I'm not for, looking into factory farms and supporting small farmers. I certainly am. But you have to be honest and look at all sides of the equation. Factory farms, regardless of you think they're heinous or not, they provide cheap food. And so when we eliminate them, it's the poor that pay the most. They're the ones most affected. But anyways, as soon as these prices go up, right? You know what happens immediately when we say we're no longer going to use fossil fuels? So all the OPEC nations will no longer be able to sell us fossil fuels. You know what's going to happen immediately? China and India and all these other countries that are seeking to be budding economic successes are going to say, yeah, we'll take that fossil fuel. Yep, send it over here. And what do they have to lose? Hypothetically, the Green New Deal plan is, hey, China, pollute the hell out of whatever you want. And once we develop the technology that becomes effective and profitable, we'll give it to you for free. So what's China have to lose? Now, here's the problem. You might say, well, it's worth it in the end. But AOC's saying we only have 10 years. That's their argument. That's why we have to suffer now. That's why our economy has to collapse. We can't worry about economic things. Did you hear Greta Thunberg? All of you immoral people talking about economic growth, it's just evil. We have to suffer. Our economy has to tank. And I'll go through the Green New Deal. I'll show you why that would be the case. So meanwhile, as soon as that happens, all of these other countries like China that actually are bigger polluters than us will take advantage and start importing those fossil fuels. By the way, they don't care. They view us as a geopolitical rival that they're trying to catch up to. They'll take that advantage. They don't care if it causes pollution. Why would they? The U.S. is fixing all of it. Just like right now, how the U.S., right, when you come to NATO, that's one of the things Trump's doing well. Why is it that we have to pay for everyone's defense? No one else puts in their fair share. So the rest of the world will be happy to say, sure, U.S., you tax the crap out of your citizens. You lower your quality of life. You lower your GDP coming up with a solution and not using fossil fuels anymore. Meanwhile, we'll take those cheap fossil fuels because now the law of supply and demand means there'll be so much surplus because the U.S. isn't using fossil fuels, which means China can get it way cheaper, and we don't care at all. We'll pollute every way we want. So then the logical extrapolation of the Green New Deal is, when do we bomb China? That's it. We only have 10 years, right? That's what they tell you. We only have 10 years. So if we're only 15% of the CO2, how do we stop the other 85%? You notice they never want to talk about Greta Thunberg, right? When she's filing her complaint about France and the United States and I think England, a couple others. Notice she didn't say China. Notice she didn't say India. Why is that when they're the worst polluters? Isn't that odd? So what are we going to do? Just leave them? Can someone show me the math? Right? And this is what I love about this, science deniers. If you have a problem with climate change, you're a science denier. Show me the science. Show me the science that says if the U.S., even if we could get to net zero, like she says in 10 years, even if we could eliminate our 15%, please show me the math that says if we don't eliminate our 15%, we're all dead. But if we do eliminate it, then it doesn't matter if China and India pollute more. It won't matter. Can someone show me the scientists saying that? I haven't seen it. Now, why does this matter? Right? Newbies, right? Maybe you're wondering, why does this matter? Because once you come to that conclusion that we only have 10 years, bombing China, that's a defensible position. Eating corpses to stop consumption of meat, like a Swedish scientist said, that becomes a defensible position. Eating babies? Why not? If I were to tell you, like honestly, like say you believe this climate change hysteria, right? Let's just assume all of you watching believe it. And I was to say to you, we are so screwed. We are dead. If we don't make insane changes within 10 years, we're all dead in the next 50 years. Completely dead. We need to start eating babies. It's grotesque, it's disgusting, but we have to do it. It'll stop our meat consumption. It assures that we won't have overpopulation in the future. We need to eat babies. Eating the old people won't help because that'll still lead to the young generations exploiting the environment as we get older. So we need to eliminate the younger generation. So it's not enough just to kill them. If we eat the meat, then that means we can stop factory farming. Okay. But what would you say? If you literally, it's one of two options. Either you eat babies or the world ends. Which one are you going to do? Now, it sounds ridiculous because you would say, wait a minute. What is the connection between eating babies and saving the world? Isn't there other less heinous, less radical options we could do? And you'd be right. The same is true of the Green New Deal. There's all sorts of less radical options we could do. So let's look when they say that there's a consensus, right? They always say this. There's a consensus on climate change. 95% of scientists agree or whatever. The numbers are garbage. They just pull numbers out of thin air. How many scientists are there? Anytime you talk about a percentage of something, you need to know the total number, right? So if I say 30% of illegal immigrants are X, the first thing you should ask is, okay, how many illegal immigrants are there? Because if I don't know, then how can I say 30%? I could say a substantial portion, or I could say a large amount, or a few amount, but I can't give a percentage. It's the same with the 95% of scientists agree. Okay, how many scientists do we have that are weighing in on this? Well, we don't know. That's just kind of anecdotal. Oh, okay. So then let's not act like you're using a scientific measure here. You're just saying most scientists. Got it. Yes, that's exactly what I meant. I was hoping this was... I put this to my wife last night. I was like, ooh, I'm going to call my live stream the Green New Veal. Like eating baby cow. Right? Tender babies. I hoped people got it. So I hope that it came through. But... anyways, when they say that, see, here's what I say about climate change. I'm willing to concede the following things. One, I'm willing to concede that the climate is changing. I believe there's a consensus on that. Second, I'm willing to concede that humans have something to do with it. I'll make that concession. That's about the end of the consensus as far as I can see. Here's things we don't have a consensus on. How much humans have to do with it, how bad things will get, how long it'll take them to get that bad, how successful any changes we make could be, how much money it would cost to make the changes for need to be successful, how much would we change without government intervention to reduce these. There's all sorts of questions. How much does humans have to do with change? I mean, there's compelling evidence. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, and I'm not going to pretend I am. And I thought about doing this and going heavily into the science with this video, but I'm not going to do it. But there's compelling evidence that sunspots have a lot to do with climate change. I know my limitations, right? But this, to me, it's like, everyone says, all the science that's against the prevailing orthodoxy is paid for by the fossil fuel industries. Really? Maybe. I know a lot of the science that's paid for to come to the conclusion that climate change is such a big threat, get government grants designed to fight climate change. So they have as much of an incentive as the other side to keep coming up with these conclusions. I know that I saw as far back as 2006 emails being released by people at places like the IPCC showing that they were fudging the data. I know that they've been caught several times doing that. Does that mean everything they're saying is a lie? No. But let's not act like they're pure as the driven snow either. If you're going to accuse one side of bias, then you have to factor in the bias of the other side. And I know that I'm not just going to trust a scientist because they say they're a scientist. Did you see the video of these people that were writing in all these journals? And it was this group of 3 people, and they decided they were going to write in all these like feminist journals and things. All these studies they did. So one of the studies was that we needed heterosexual people to feel their dog's genitals, to have more gay acceptance and things like this. They made all this crap up. It was just totally made up. And they kept getting accepted in these peer-reviewed journals over and over again. Those were scientists that were just claiming without actual scientific facts, yes, this stuff's true. All these peers that reviewed it said, yep, good, great. I know that there are people in biology departments and in other supposed scientific departments that say that there's no biological difference between men and women. I know that's crap. So again, I'm not here, and I know eventually someone will say, oh, well, what this argument is, Rob's denying science and he's saying all scientists are bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm willing to listen to the science. But as far as I see, there's not a consensus on things other than the climate is changing and humans have something to do with it. Now, I also know that over and over, the same people that are screaming the sky's falling now, they told us in the 70s we were entering a global cooling period, and that we were all going to suffer massive effects from that. Then they told us acid rain was going to take us all out. I remember being told in school that I couldn't leave the faucet run when I was brushing my teeth because we were going to run out of groundwater. I remember being told that, later on in my school career that all sorts of stuff were going to happen, like we were going to we'd see the coast underwater by the year 2006 and things like that. Al Gore predicted that by 2011, half of our coast would be underwater. Things like that. Acid rain was going to take it so out. And here's a good rule of thumb. Anytime someone's demanding massive power and massive wealth transfer, you should be highly skeptical of their position. And Tucker says this all the time. Can you point to one of their solutions that doesn't involve them getting way more power? And you could tell because they don't just talk about climate change. If you really wanted to talk about fuel sources that could actually make a huge change that don't add CO2, you'd talk about nuclear energy. But most of them are against it. Why? What does things like reparations or providing jobs for indigenous peoples or economic justice among different ethnicities, what does any of that have to do with climate change? Yet that's in all the bills they propose. It seems more like this is a massive government overreach program, which is exactly what it is. Now, you might say, one of the arguments people make is like, well, it's try or die. We're all doomed if we don't do this, so we might as well try. But even their own numbers don't say that. Right? I'm going to bring up here in a second the Green New Deal that they pushed forward through Congress. Their numbers don't. It says it'll cost us 500 billion or trillion, 500 billion, I think. That's not the end of the world. That's their number, right? So if we're assuming their number is true, they're not saying, their scientists that they cite say it'll be catastrophic in the sense it's going to cost a huge amount of money to deal with this, and people's lives will be negatively affected and people will die, right? That's what they're saying. But that's different than AOC saying the end of the world and all these people saying the end of the world, even their numbers. But so when they accuse us of being the science deniers, where are their numbers coming from? The own scientists they cite don't show that. And the other thing is, they never take into account the natural changes that we're having. For example, they take these numbers and it assumes that our CO2 production will be the same in 100 years as it is now. But we can see that number falling now. Remember when Obama decided to invest $500 million of your U.S. tax dollars into a renewable energy company called Solyndra that some of his friends were running. How'd that work out? Oh, they got rich. Judge them by their actions, not their words. If they thought the world was ending because of climate change, would they be flying around in jets? Would they own multiple houses? Would Obama be buying a $15 million house on coastal property? Of course not. You know, it was like the preachers that told you they knew God was coming back, right? We know that he's coming. Yet they're adulterers or they're committing the sins they're criticizing you for. They're not living as if they believe what they're saying. So, all right, let's go to the Green New Deal. Now, why is this important to look at? We literally had a woman, albeit a troll, say that we should eat babies in front of AOC yesterday. If you caught the beginning of my video, I kind of was laughing at that. And people are now, what they're trying to say is like, oh, it's a Republican. First off, it was from the LaRouche group. LaRouche was always, as far as I know, was always like a communist, lefty type person. So I'm not sure if his group's now a right-wing group or not. It's irrelevant. They just want to say anything they disagree with is right-wing. Second, that doesn't matter. The point is that everyone at that rally that was AOC Trump or fans and AOC herself took this position seriously and just said, well, there was this, and there's a tradition of using satire to kind of make fun of the positions of your political opponents. There was this movie, what was it called? I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to find it for you guys. But the premise of it was these people, they were like trolls back in the early to mid 2000s, and they got a website that was like worldtradeorganization.org or .com. They just bought that website. And so then these news places would call them all the time and be like, hey, does the WTO want to give a statement on this? And they'd be like, sure. And they were trolls that were making fun of the WTO. And, you know, they're at the end of the movie, they suggested all sorts of things. Like they had a big rally in front of these people, all these like think tanks and business people. And it was basically this. Oh, we should take fecal matter and we can make it into burgers and then we can feed people in the third world. And all the, you know, the academics say, oh, yes, this is good. Then they go out and they do the same presentation for like regular people like me and you. And they would be like, what? No, you can't do that. And then their big thing at the end was, it's really funny. Oh, man, why can't I think of the name? They proposed this system where they're basically doing this. Like, okay, so we'll go into these sub-Saharan African countries, and what we do is we kind of take the land, but then we show them how to use it, and we'll live in big houses on the land, and we'll build like little shanties for them, but they could live there with their families, and we'll put these collars on them, and then we could keep track of where they're at all the time, and we'll make sure we direct them how to work. We won't pay them a wage, but we'll make sure that they have meals and a roof over their head. Slavery. They're literally advocating slavery. And these people are applauding, and they're like, so here's the device that would control and monitor all these collars. And they rip their business suit off, and it just has a giant inflatable penis with a monitor on it that they can stare. It's like this gold suit, and everyone's clapping, right? Now, those people were satirists, but the point was, do you see how insane these people are? Do you see what's going on? That's exactly what this girl is doing. She could suggest eat babies, and people are, what? Go away! Shut up! They didn't even know she was a troll. They all thought, this is reasonably could be a supporter of AOC. Even on Twitter last night, I was one of the first people I saw was like, this is clearly a troll. A lot of people bought it. So first off, here we are with the Green New Deal, the House resolution that was put forth February 7th. This is the most recent one to my knowledge. Here you can see the names of all those that signed it. So this is not a fringe policy. Many of the people that are running for president, including Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, and I think there are others that are pushing this. So let's go through it. Now, one thing to know, it doesn't talk specifics very much, and this was the second document that they put forward, though the first one that they actually put forth with the resolution. And you could see by reading the previous one how insane what they would actually be, right? Because it's going to be ambiguous. They'll just say, like, we should lower emissions and here's our goal. They keep using the term technologically feasible. Well, what does that mean? you could see with their words and their actions and their previous documents what the meaning is. So as we go through, I'll let you know. So here they start with their conclusions as to why the Green New Deal is necessary. Recognizing the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal. Whereas an October 2018 report entitled Special Report on Global Warming of 1.5 Celsius by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the November 18th Fourth National Climate Assessment Report found that human activity is the dominant cause of observed climate change over the past century. Okay, even if that's true, what does that imply about the future century? Is it taking into account that we're reducing emissions now? Is it taking into account that other countries are increasing emissions, such as China and India? Does it take into account the fact, how does it, dominant, what does that mean? Are we 51%? Are we 95%? Second, a changing climate is causing sea levels to rise, an increase in wildfires, severe storms, droughts, and other extreme weather events that threaten human life, healthy communities, and critical infrastructure. Okay, so they put this in the terms of economics. Well, then it's never just a simple, there's a problem, let's fix it. Any problem that you seek to initiate, you have to look at the pros and cons of it as well. So they're admitting here that economics matter. So if we could prove that their plan's likely to bankrupt the country, that proves that it would be a net worse. By the way, every study that's looked into this shows, as countries, particularly developing countries, go through economic problems, they actually become bigger polluters because as they try to get back to their previous standard of living, they exploit the environment more. So that means if we massively harm the U.S. economy, what will happen is people will be so desperate that they end up exploiting the environment, their local environments, and governmentally, and it'll actually make environmentalism go much worse. But a lot of the claims that you hear them make sometimes to me seem to be rebutted. Like they constantly say, oh, the ice shelves are melting, these glaciers are melting. But then I've seen reports that say, no, that's not true. I don't know what to believe, So anyways, 3, global warming at or above 2 degrees Celsius beyond pre-industrialized levels. Now keep in mind, go back up to the top. Special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now we're talking about if it gets over 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, well, their own report said 1.5. And that's if we do nothing. But let's see what 2 degrees Celsius would do. A mass migration from the regions most affected by climate change. Okay. I mean, that's terrible, and I would like to avoid that. Don't get me wrong. But that stuff does happen. I'm sure there are places in the world a 2-degree increase in Celsius would go from uninhabitable to habitable, like Siberia, like places in Canada. The same with the south of the equator. More than $500 billion in lost annual economic output in the United States by the year 2100. Okay, but here's the problem with this. Even if that number would be true, and that's a lot, what would the GDP be at that point? It could be massively larger than it is now. And the only reason I bring this up is $50 in your pocket today is worth 50 ducats in your pocket 80 years from now, right? You understand why. Not just inflation and other things like that, but you could use your $50 that could then double your investment up over and over and things like that. So if their plan costs trillions of dollars now a year, even if it would work and save us from this $500 billion, is that an economic gain or not? Now, of course, the argument will be, it's about more than economics. I agree, and I'm willing to concede that. But don't throw these numbers out like this somehow justifies your position. Because what they're going to do is collapse the U.S. economy with this plan, if they would ever get it pushed. Next, wildfires that by 2050 will annually burn at least twice as much forest area in the western United States than typically burned by wildfires in the year preceding 2019. Lost more than 99% of all coral reefs. More than 350,000 more people will be exposed globally to deadly heat stress by 2050. That one's ironic because they want to get rid of fossil fuels that would actually result in people not being able to have things like air conditioning. They talk about that all the time, how evil air conditioning is. So instead of having people die by heat stress in 2050, let's do it now! Sorry, all of you people in India. We have to get rid of fossil fuels. You all have to die of heat stress. A risk of damage of $1 trillion of public infrastructure and coastal real estate in the United States. Okay, now keep in mind, they said all of this before, right? Al Gore was telling you with an inconvenient truth back in 2004. All this catastrophe would happen by what? You know? So, we should take it with a grain of salt, that's all I'm saying. 4. Global temperatures must be kept below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrialized levels to avoid the most severe impacts of a changing climate, which will require... Okay, see, so already... I mean, it's just... You could tell already if you have an eye for this stuff. Why do they keep changing from 1.5 Celsius, then to 2 degrees Celsius, now back to 1.5 degrees Celsius? It's because they use whatever number is convenient for them at the time. Which already goes to show you should be skeptical. Global reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from human sources of 40 to 60% from 2010 levels by 2030. And net zero global emissions by 2050. So that means no carbon emissions by 2050. And 40 to 60% by 2030 eliminated. This is through policy in the United States where we have 15% of emissions. How in God's name are we going to convince China to have zero global emissions by 2050? Now, I have people tell me, but listen, Rob, here's the deal. What they do is they put forth a plan that might seem like pie in the sky, that might seem unattainable, but then that allows them to compromise down to get to a more rational number. To which my response is, that would be like me saying, I'm selling a house that markets at $50,000. And so I say, here's what I'll do. I'll put it on the market for $500 billion, and then I'll leave them bargain me down. No one's even going to call me. It's not a serious offer. It's the same here. There will not be zero emissions by 2050. At least not because government enforces it. It could be because free markets go in that direction. Notice this plan doesn't suggest anything about foreign polluters. They just assume, well, once we get zero emissions, then we'll, whatever, they honestly think that like there's going to be this magical device. We're going to come up with like some sort of orb that just powers everything in our country. And then we could give that orb to other countries. Whoopee! Everything's solved. That's not the way it works. This is called a threshold argument. When I debated, you would have this. Everyone in debate wants to talk about nuclear war. It's always the end of the world. So the topic might be, you need to reduce corn subsidies. So you'd be like, our plans to reduce corn subsidies. And the reason why is this. If we don't reduce corn subsidies, then our economy will collapse. And if our economy collapses, we'll attack China. And if we attack China, it's a global nuclear war. And so that's like every round it would be something like that. And so one of the arguments you can make, and inexperienced debaters would fall for this trick all the time. You'd say, how soon would this war occur if we don't do your plan? Oh, like next week. As soon as you can imagine. We're on the brink right now, man. Well, the problem is your plan can't solve it in time then. And that's the same thing we're seeing here. They're saying, we're screwed if this isn't done by 2030. If 50% of global emissions aren't done by 2030, we're done. That's 11 years. Now, keep in mind, 2030, it's 2019 right now. Let me read that again, right? A global reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from human sources of 40 to 60% from 2010 levels by 2030. That's 11 years. Now, this plan itself admits it would take 10 years to implement in the United States. So conceivably, if we come up with some badass technology to totally get to net zero carbon emissions in 10 years, how do we then get that technology to the rest of the world within that same time frame? Because we're only responsible for 15%. So even if we totally eliminate that 15%, 85% of emissions are still there. Their best estimate are we still need to reduce another 25%. How does that happen? And they're saying, if we don't, we will, quote, the most severe impacts of climate change is what we'll suffer. So the things they said above, 99% of all coral reefs being destroyed, 350 million people exposed to this, $1 trillion of damages, right? That's what they say. So we're screwed. Their own plan does nothing to address the global emission. So they're admitting, right at the beginning of the Green New Deal, they admit, we're all doomed. There's nothing we could do. Now, you might still say, well, it's worth the try, even though they basically say in their own plan, the numbers show that we're screwed. We still might as well try. But that's only in the world where they 100% have proven their numbers, and in a world where there's no downside to the proposed solution. And in both of those cases, they're wrong. Because the United States has historically been responsible for a disproportionate amount of greenhouse gas emissions, having emitted 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions through 2014, and has a high technological capacity, the United States must take a leading role in reducing emissions through economic transformation. So even their numbers admit, going into 2014, we were responsible for 20%. Even if we go with that number, that's still 20% throughout the rest of the world. And by the way, that was through 2014. Budding industrial economies like China and India are increasing more and more every year, their percentage of CO2. It says, the United States is currently experiencing several related crises. 1, life expectancy declining while basic needs such as clean air, clean water, healthy food, and adequate health care, housing, transportation, education are inaccessible to a significant portion of the United States. What does education have to do with this? Even things like healthy food. Notice they threw that in there, education. Wait, what? Global warming? Climate change? Education? What? It's the first sign within this own document. This is not a document about the environment. This is a document about the socialist takeover of the country. It's just the fringe, all right? It's just AOC. Let's go back up here. Does that look like just the fringe? That's just in the House. Let's just pick somebody. There's Ted Lieu. Who we got? Castro in Texas. Who we got? Kennedy. DeSanter. Engel. Isn't that weird? I thought it was just the fringe. They're not socialists, though. They're not socialists. What did they say? They said, we have to reduce emissions through economic transformation. What could that mean? It means the total government control of our economic sphere. At least of our energy industry. You can see that. But they're admitting this is an economic transformation. They've admitted. People in AOC's camp, people in Bernie's camp have admitted. This isn't just an environmental policy. It's reshaping the entire United States and our economy. Second, a 4-decade trend in wage stagnation, deindustrialization, and anti-labor policies. What does this have to do with climate change? Deindustrialization? Industrialization is what put more CO2 in the air. So they can't have it both ways. They're like, oh, it sucks, these people that lost these factory jobs. At the same time, we want to eliminate factories. You don't get to have it both ways. Hey, hourly wages overall stagnated since the 70s despite increased worker productivity. Okay, I agree. 100%. What does this have to do with climate change again? I would argue that one of the big reasons for this is because of big government. Because we've allowed big government to be so powerful with its subsidies, regulation, and other interference into the free market that encouraged lobbying from these businesses that allowed wealthy people that are lobbyists and bankers and things like that to collude with the government and the people they're buying off in the government to be able to siphon money from the middle class to the upper class. I believe that the best way to harm the middle class and workers and lower their wages is the same globalist agenda that's being pushed by the people that push the Green New Deal. Things like open borders. They don't care about that, though. They don't care about the laws of supply and demand, and if you bring in a bunch of low-skilled labor, that the people that are most affected are other people with low-skilled labor, and that drives down their value in the workforce. B, the third worst level of socioeconomic mobility developed in the free world before the Great Recession. Again, nothing to do with climate change. C, the erosion of earning and bargaining power of the workers. D, inadequate resources for public sector workers to confront challenges of climate change at the local, state, and federal levels. None of this has anything to do with climate change. None of it. Even that last part. Inadequate resources for public sector workers. They're saying, we aren't giving enough money to fight climate change at the local and state level. So they want more money. Where are they getting money for all these programs? Now you might be asking, well, geez, they're saying an awful lot here that they want to do an awful lot. How much is this going to cost? They don't know. Bernie said his healthcare, Medicare for all, his numbers could be as high as 60 trillion. Another trillion for free college for everyone. That's the low estimate. So 61 trillion for his plan over 10 years. What do we spend a year? 4 trillion? So that's more than our entire budget a year. They say, we'll get rid of defense spending. That's 500 billion. How's that going to pay 5 trillion a year? Where's the money coming from? We'll just tax the rich. They'll leave. It just makes no sense. Now we're giving money to state, local, and federal level for climate change. Okay. The greatest income inequality since the 20s with the top 1% of earners accruing 91% of gains for the first 2 years after the Great Recession. I've already told you one of the big reasons that's happening because of big government and intervention. Second, a large racial wealth divide among the difference of 20 times more wealth between the average white family and the average black family. Why don't they use the Asian family? Right? Wouldn't you take the top number and the bottom number? So you'd say which types of families make the most money and what's the disparity times the types of family that make the least money. That would be Asians to blacks. But they say white. I wonder why that is. Any idea? What has to do with cultural Marxism? They don't like white people. White people are oppressors. See? This is how the Democrats and the not all, but the establishment Democrats, and by those I mean the people running the party, this is how they think of people. You're not an individual. I'm not Rob Knorr, a person with my own opinions and thoughts. I am just a series of labels. I'm white. I'm male. I'm heterosexual. I'm fat. I'm able-bodied. I'm Christian. I'm native born, and I was born in the United States. Now, you take those categories, and each category, you're either an oppressor or an oppressed. So white, that's oppressor. Other colors other than white, then you're oppressed. Male, that's oppressor. Female would be oppressed. Not non-transgender, that's oppressor. Transgender would be oppressed. Christian, that's oppressor. Non-Christian would be oppressed. Fat, hey, I'm oppressed there. You skinny people are oppressing me. So I got one on the ledger. But do you see how that works? The oppressor groups, you're allowed to be as vitriolic, attack, call them names. You could be Rashida Tlaib and you could say, just yesterday it came out, she was saying about facial recognition technology to the Detroit chief of police. Well, I hope you have black people using this because white people, they can't tell black people apart. That's called racism. That's House of Representative member on national television admitting to racism. And not just hypothetical racism like, hi, where are you from? Literally saying this group of people is prejudiced and they think all black people look alike. That's racism. How can she get away with that? Because she was being racist towards white people. So it's okay. It's okay. You could have, a black girl who allegedly got her hair cut by white kids that held her down. That's a huge national story. But you could put a dozen videos up in the same time frame over a week of black kids beating up white kids or black kids beating up Hispanic kids or any of those other groups. And it's not a story. And it doesn't just work the way you think before people go, here we go, Rob's just one of these racial grousers. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's also detrimental to the black community. So let's say you're a black victim of homicide. No one cares about you at all. That doesn't fit the narrative. Whatever. All we care about is what did the perpetrator look like. That's it. If you're a black victim of a black perpetrator, no one cares. Shut up. Now, if you're a black victim of a white perpetrator, now we got a story. Now we could run with it. That's garbage to black people, by the way. The whole thing's garbage, right? By the way, and I know I'm getting off track with this cultural Marxism, but it literally influences all the decisions that are made. Even with this, you can't get away from it in this Green New Deal. You see the average white family, the average black family, racial divides amongst wealth, right? That's what it's going to be. It's going to be all the cultural Marxism, right? Got to divide you by the race. Got to divide you by the gender. Got to divide you by sexuality. By your religion. Whether you're indigenous or not. That's what it's going to be all about. You'll see. And you'll say, wait, what? I thought we were talking about the climate. Supposedly. But the government wants to have, the Democrats want to be given all this power to completely transform our energy and economic system. Completely overhaul it and have complete control over it. In the name of climate change. But then they throw in all this other crap. Now think about that. Say your local government comes to you and says, my God, we need your land because here's what's going on. We need to put this road through here because we have a new hospital coming and, you know, your yard is right in the way, so we're going to have to take your land. And you're like, oh my God, like, that's terrible. I don't want to give up my land, but I guess if it's for about saving sick people for the hospital. Yeah, and also we're going to put hot dog stands up there and a restaurant that the township's going to own. And you'd be like, wait, what does that have to do with the hospital? I was willing to do this when it was to help sick people, but now you're talking about making a profit selling hot dogs? You focus on the one thing. If it's about the climate, let's focus on the climate. You're saying we need a massive government takeover and to give all these people the power because of the environment. And then they can't even help themselves. They're basically like, yeah, and we're going to give reparations. And we're going to give people economic choices based on their skin color and their gender. Well, I didn't sign up for that. Too bad. Shut up. We need the power. You don't believe in the gender pay cap and trying to fix it? Well, then clearly you're okay with losing 99% of the Earth's coral reefs. Wait, what? What does one of those have to do with the other? Shut up, bigot. That's how you know they're full of crap. C, a gender earnings pay gap that results in women earning approximately 80% as much as men at the median. Lies. I'm sure you've all, if you're listening to me, you've probably heard of the gender pay gap myth, but if you would like, I can go through it real quick. The problem is that's not looking at job to job. That's just looking at, in general, what men make versus women make. And there's all kinds of reasons that number is about 80 cents. The first is men tend to work longer hours and overtime. The second is men tend to have mobility when it comes to jobs. Women don't really want to move to get paid the most for the job that they could do. Men are more likely to move city to city. The third is men are more likely to ask for raises. The fourth is men are more likely to have consistently been working since they were at a young age, where a lot of times women go through things like childbirth, and so therefore they haven't been working as much as the man. So Thomas Sowell does an excellent presentation where he, instead of taking men to women, what he does is he takes never married women compared to men. And it turns out those numbers, and this is even back in the 70s and 80s, those numbers are way more similar. Because it turns out if you weren't married and you were on your own working, you're making about as much as a man. But when you voluntarily enter a relationship, you give each other different goals. And traditionally those goals have been, and they still are, though it's changing, the man would go to work and focus on making as much income as possible, and the woman might have a job, but she also took care of things around the home, which, by the way, is a difficult and necessary and awesome job. Being a mother, for example, is basically the best job in the world. Why do we belittle that? And it's not just societal pressures. It's also biological. Men can't get pregnant. The act of getting pregnant is horribly stressful on your body for 9 months. And afterwards, even. So these things all factor into this gap. It's garbage. When we start to look at actual statistics, we can see that these numbers also of the gender pay cap only apply to people born before, I can't remember the exact date, but basically since 2009, people under the age of 30, it's now switching that women are making more. There's almost a 2-to-1 bachelor degree gap, particularly, and it's, by the way, it's most prevalent in the black community, of women getting bachelor degrees to men. Almost 2 women to every 1 man get a bachelor degree in the black community. In general, it's about, like, I think 70%, or I think it's something like 56% women. I wish I had the chart with me right now, but way more women now are getting college degrees than men. And we know people with college degrees tend to make more money. But no one cares. Women do way more successful in school than men anyways, even at the high school level. So we have all of this stuff. Now, does this mean that I think the government should get involved and do something about the gender educational gap? that men are getting less college degrees than women? No, not at all. But somehow that lie that's been disproven a million times, here it is, as if it's a scientific fact. Did you ever go to a mechanic or, like, I don't know crap about cars, right? You go to a mechanic and they could just be like, hey, yeah, it's going to cost $700 to fix your car. You don't know. You can take it to another mechanic. But if you're not a mechanic, it's not your area of expertise. At some point, you have some degree of faith that you're like, okay, I trust this guy, and I'm just going to pay him, or woman, lest I be called sexist. That's the way these climate change scientists are to me. At some point, you're just taking them on faith. You don't know. I know they've been wrong over and over again. I know in the 70s they said it was a global cooling period, and then they said we'd all be underwater by the end of the 90s, and then again by 2010, and they said acid rain would wipe us all out. I know all that, and that was all wrong. But this time they're right? Just shut up and trust them, or you're an evil person. Give them all your money. You know, if you're a coal miner or something, just quit your job. Just do what they say. Yes, they're still flying around in private jets. They still own multiple homes. But trust us, it's you, the poor or the middle class person. You're the problem. You need to change. Bernie's at his third lake house recovering right now, telling you, you need to change. By the way, I do wish Bernie a speedy recovery, sincerely. But he's a hypocrite. Leo DiCaprio's right now flying on a private jet to go to a climate change thing to tell you why your light bulbs are the problem with the environment. Now shut up and pay more taxes. It's so ridiculous. But you have to believe me, even though they've been wrong all those times. Even though in their own document they're putting forth garbage that you know has been debunked, like this gender pay gap. Moving on. Climate change, pollution, environmental destruction have exacerbated systemic, racial, regional, social, environmental, and economic injustice, referred to in this preamble as systemic injustices, by disproportionately affecting indigenous peoples, communities of color, migrant communities, deindustrialized communities, depopulated rural communities, that'd be me, the poor, low-income workers, women, the elderly, the unhoused, people with disabilities, and youth. Garbage. Let's take women. How are women more affected by climate change than men? Just take that study. Why do you think they would say women are more... Let's say that AOC, well, she's not smart enough to even remotely engage in a conversation with me, but one of the people behind her, right, is in the room with me right now, and I'll be like, whoa, let's take women. How are they disproportionately affected by climate change? You know what they're going to say? Well, because as mothers, you know, their body goes through, but I thought there was no biological difference. I thought it was all social construct. If gender is a social construct, then how does something that's not a social construct, like climate change, have a disproportional effect on women? Are you saying that as a society, we somehow make the sun overheat women more? What exactly are you saying here? They just throw this crap out of here like this is proven. This is nonsense. This is the same group that was telling you stuff like, well, the reason ISIS is the way it is because of global warming. Because all these members of ISIS are just, you know, it's hot where they're at now. It's hotter than it used to be, and so you can't really blame them. That's the same people that are telling you this crap. You just say this. If you're concerned about climate change and you think the world's going to die because of it, you say, hey, climate change affects people a lot and it's going to ruin the world, so we need to change it. You don't say, particularly black people and women. What does that have anything to do with anything? Are you really so skeptical of the left, of the people that want to focus on minority populations, all these feminists and these intersectional studies people? Do you think that you'd go up to them and you'd be like, hey man, the Earth's going to die in 10 years if we don't solve pollution? They'd be like, yeah, I don't care. By the way, it'll affect black people. Oh, okay. Now I'm concerned. Wow. It's transparently garbage. It's transparently intersectional BS. And that's why I don't trust the rest of it. And if you're watching this, what do I got watching? 6 people? If by chance you're watching this and you're one of these scientists for the IPCC or wherever, you should be shouting out against it. Don't lump your crap in with us, okay? We're just looking at the weather. We're looking at the climate. We're looking at the numbers. Don't lump in your gender pay crap garbage. Don't lump in this race garbage. We don't want to hear it. You just make us look bad. That's what the scientists should be saying, but they're not, are they? Remember when they had that scientist against Trump thing? And then they had to shut it down because there weren't enough people of color that were in charge of it? This crap affects the scientists too. That's why I don't believe on face value what they're saying. Now, I don't automatically discredit it. I'm willing to look at the numbers and have a discussion. But there are scientists on the other side. And I don't care what the issue is. When you're talking about massively increasing the size of government, particularly in ways that would be massive socialism, I'm very, very skeptical because I've seen that fail all over the world. We have a big environmental bureaucracy now, right? How long have they known about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan? Did they do anything about that? They fix that? They can't even fix the water in Flint. And that's one of the things that really pisses me off about all of this. While they're looking at we're all going to be dead in 100 years if we don't eliminate cars and fossil fuels, there's actually real stuff we could be doing to help the environment. Like, go to the guy, #ThePersistence on Twitter. He's a conservative. So far, he's gone to Baltimore and LA, cleaned up tons of garbage and trash there. That's real environmental stuff that he's doing. I know in the area I live in, there's tons of hunters, conservationists, groups like Ducks Unlimited, rifle groups, gun groups. They're out there constantly cleaning up the local environment. Going into the forest, cleaning up, going alongside the streets, picking up trash. Doing things like raising grouse or raising pheasants, raising deer to make sure that they have a healthy population. Hunter, we give, I don't know if you don't live in a rural area, but, our state, what would it be? Wildlife Commission are very good. The state level people are very good. They take numbers of how many white-tailed deer, for example, are in the population every year, and then they issue hunting license based on that number. Sometimes you'll go through a hunting season and they'll actually give out more license at the end of it because they realize that the intake of how many deers that were killed weren't enough. And if we don't carefully control these populations, they'll be damaging to the environment. Those are people that really care about the environment. They care about being custodians. They care about their children being able to enjoy the same wildlife that they like. But they aren't on TV screaming, hey, these big city liberals, they don't care. They don't do anything to help the actual forest. They live in squalor. Do you see them saying that? Do you see Ducks Unlimited? Do you see the gun groups doing that? No. They're just out there cleaning stuff up, not asking for the praise. That's real, tangible stuff that we could do. Instead of flying on private jets to yell at people like that they're rednecks. That's what the left's doing. That's what the people that are advocating the Green New Deal are doing. And when I tell my friends that are reasonable that support stuff like this, well, yeah, I agree it's crappy that Bernie does that. It's crappy that all Hollywood does that, but that doesn't change the fact. Yes, it does, because I'm not going to give my life over and all the power in the hands of people that are unwilling to engage in the behaviors that they're demanding of me. If Bernie was living like this, if AOC was living like this, then maybe I'd be more likely to say, hey, maybe there's something to it. But instead, I'm just told, you're denying science if you disagree with them. All of this crap. That's exactly what they said about the gender pay gap. Turns out they were wrong about that. Turns out that's what they said in the 70s about global cooling. That's what they said in the 90s, that we were all going to be underwater by global warming. They're wrong every time. But this time I have to believe them, and to question them is terrible. Now, I'm still going to go through this, but I want to take the time to tell you. This is my feeling on what climate changes became. People like me that don't like these foreign regime change wars, that don't like the things like the Patriot Act. I've said stuff like, this is one of the things I said about the Patriot Act. Here's the problem. Once you start a massive infringement on our rights and a massive government program like that, you'll never get rid of it. And here's why. Let's say we institute the Patriot Act because of 9/11 and because of terroristic attacks. And for 10 years after that, we don't see one attack. Do you think then the government says, okay, we didn't see any attacks, so now we're going to remove the Patriot Act? No, instead they'll say, see, it worked. That's proof that it worked, right? That's what they would say. Now, let's revamp. We go back, we pass the Patriot Act, and in the next 10 years, we see an uptick in terrorist attacks. Do you think they'll say, okay, clearly the Patriot Act didn't work. Might as well scrap it. No, they'll say, it wasn't enough. We need to take more of your rights. That's the same thing we see happening here. They're not. Do you think if we just say, you know what, fine, we'll pass the Green New Deal. We think you guys are full of it. Let's just pass it, and that'll make everything better, right? Do you think then in 10 years? It's the same with reparations. I always just tell me the number. Give me the dollar figure that reparations, where you could say, here's the reparation number. Once we get to this number, then no longer after this can we then use Jim Crow or slavery as an excuse for anything. This is totally made up for. They can't give you the number. Because you know darn well, 5 years after reparations, you'd go into one of these inner cities. And what would they say? Well, the problem's still systemic racism. That's the problem. If we gave the gender pay gap, if we said, fine, you're right, we're going to put a 20% tax on men and give all that money to every woman in the country. Anytime there was a population of women that then after that started to have less income than men, do you think they'd say, hey, fair's fair, the men are being taxed 20%? They'd say, nope, it's still the patriarchy. Somehow it's that darn patriarchy. We used to lie people in to giving up their rights, to giving the government massive power. That's what the Reichstag fire was about, right? That's what the idea of people talk about false flag attacks. But the idea is you scare people with the boogeyman over there. It's the Chinese, it's the communists, it's the Russians. That's what they're trying to do with Trump, right? The Russians. There's Russians under all of our beds. Only it's not working, is it? They'd interview all these people, even Democrats that hate Trump. You know, what is your top issue? No one said Russia. No one at all. No one cared about it. The actual voters. Sure, if it could have brought Trump down, Democrat voters would have liked it. But they didn't care. They hated Trump for other reasons. Maybe climate change or whatever. They thought he was a racist. But Russia was, even for them. And certainly the people that were independents or Trump voters were like, what? Russia? You kidding? They tried to scare you with that boogeyman. It wasn't working. You know why? Because it's becoming tougher. Because we have a growing global community. Not just because of globalism, which sucks and I fight against, but because of things like the internet. I get on here right now and FaceTime with someone with Russia like that. See their face. What's going on in your community today? They take their phone out and show me, yeah, here's what's going on. You couldn't do that in the 40s or the 50s, right? So it's hard to convince you that Russian, it used to be, during the Cold War, that guy over there, there's a guy just like you and he's striving his best to just wipe you off the face of the earth. Terrorism, we did it with that. Though it became difficult to do that as well. You know why? Because on one hand, Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra and ISIS, they're the biggest existential threat to us. So much so that you have to get groped when you go through the airport. Some TSA agent like Joe Biden sniffing your hair, putting his hand down your pants. Why? Well, terrorism, oh! Meanwhile, our government's arming terrorists, the same people in Syria and the same people in Libya. Wait a minute. These people are such a threat to me that I had to give up all my privacy? The government's now legally allowed to listen to any of my phone calls? They could wiretap me through a rubber stamp FISA court? Because these people are so scary and such a big threat to our life. Yet, we could give them M16s and trucks and all kinds of crap. Rocket-propelled grenades in other areas of the world. Does that make sense? People are getting fed up. That lie's hard to keep spreading. People are unpredictable. People are relatable. When you say that person is evil, that group is evil, we need to take your rights to fight them, people start to wise up. And so what more brilliant strategy could you have if you were the people seeking massive government reach into your rights than the climate change hysteria? Now the enemy's not people. It's this invisible thing. It's the climate. It's going to kill us all. And the evidence is all around you. See that big snowstorm last week? Yep, that's climate change. Oh man, it's hot out today. Climate change. Everything. It's not just, now they're going, well, racism, well, that's because climate change. Boy, I don't like racism. Yep, you better fight climate change. Yeah, I guess you're right. Gender pay gap, well, that's climate change. Oh, geez, how? Just trust us, it's climate change. You don't want to deny science, do you? We need to take your rights away. Nah, you can't drive it. What did Yang say? Who was one of the more reasonable candidates? Yes, we're probably entering a world where you're not allowed to own a car. You can't eat meat. Now, who did this say? Who's disproportionately affected? Let's see some of them. The poor, low-income workers, rural communities. So I live in rural Pennsylvania. Maybe you live in New York City, or maybe you live in Chicago or a big city. It is really weird to people in my community that people in these city communities could live without a car. Because to us, you got to drive to go anywhere. It's just the way it is. There ain't taxis and Ubers around here. You're driving. So if you don't have a license, you better, be married to someone who does, or have a friend that's willing to drive you around. You ain't calling someone to pick you up. It's not happening. So a world without cars, who's that affect the most? What's the big government plan here? They're going to put high-speed rail in my little town? Is that what's going on? How much money is that going to cost? Or are we going to go back to horses? I'm sure they're bad for the environment. They fart too, right? It's just nonsense. It's absolute garbage. And you know it's garbage because anytime someone tells you that for you to even question it makes you immoral, you should be highly skeptical of what they're saying. What the media tell us, right? With the Russia hoax. If you question the intel agencies, you're anti-American. You're hurting this country. If you question, Ukraine interfering to help the Democrats in the 2016 election, that's a conspiracy theory. And conspiracy theorists are a big danger to this country. That's what they tell you. How dare you question the Iraq war? That's what they told you. Libya, Obama, he won a Nobel Peace Prize. So yeah, you think you're smart because you're like, wait a minute, Obama, why are we arming Islamic terrorists to take out Gaddafi? I thought we were fighting the Islamic terrorists. How dare you say that, Rob? How dare you? Well, you think it's cool when Gaddafi killed people? Is that what you're saying, Rob? You hate your country? No, I didn't say all that. Yes, just shut your mouth. That's who these people are. So when they tell you, to question this narrative, you're killing you don't care. You're just a moron. Of course climate change is real. You're a science denier. You have to believe in this Green New Deal. That's ridiculous. Everyone should be skeptical of giving up your rights, of increasing the government in that kind of massive way. And make no mistake about it. This isn't just, no car. The fossil fuel industry's done, which is a huge industry that employs many people in this country. It's not just that. You think if you give them this power, they're going to stop? Because once the economy starts going, are they going to say, crap, our plan hurt the economy? They're going to say, no, we need more control. Here's the problem, we need more taxes, we need more of this, more of that, trust us. Every area of your life is what they seek to control. Every single area. And now they have the perfect tool. It's the climate. It's climate change. No questions allowed. You anti-science? You don't believe it? You hate science? Yeah, DJ, that's right. Like, I was talking about that Carlin bit, right? Where Carlin's like, the earth will shake humans off like a bad case of fleas. But, like Newbies was saying, there's all kinds of things. Well, I don't know what Newbie's trying to say here. I think probably being ironic based on previous comments. Yeah. But this is where eating the babies comes from. We can see that we're lowering emissions now. It doesn't matter. We need to take away your rights. We can see that a lot of the stuff they said in the past they said global cooling. That was a lie. They said, we would be underwater by 2009. That was a lie. Acid rain was going to wipe us all out. That was a lie. The hole in the ozone layer was going to wipe us all out. That was a lie. The glaciers are melting really fast right now, beyond belief. That was a lie. But give them all your rights. That's what we should all be fearful of. Even if you're concerned, I care about the environment. I do. The way you start is, as with everything in life, I do this channel. I love it. I love doing this People were like, wow, you're such an angry person yelling at. I'm not angry. I get angry about the situation, don't get me wrong, but I have fun. I love my life. I'm poor. I'm paycheck to paycheck. But I got a great family. I got dogs that I'm desperately trying to teach not to eat my shoes, but that I like. You know, I like what I do. I have a lot of fun doing these videos. But, you know, I get upset about these lies and about the idea that people are trying to control our lives and to take our rights away. But despite that, I know deep down, and this is the truth for anyone listening. This is the absolute truth. I don't care how much you hate Trump, or you hate Hillary Clinton, or you hate your governor, or you hate your congressman, or you hate your boss. All of that could be true. You might have good reasons to hate all that. But the number one person in control of your life is you. I don't care if you were given some illness. Like, life sucks. It'll throw curveballs at you. But you could, more than anything, control your life. And then your family and your loved ones. And then once you start to get to government, your local government actually has more of an influence. So when you want to make positive change in the world, before you start saying, I demand the government forces everyone else to change, you should say, what can I do to affect this change? If your big issue is climate change, then get out there and do something to make it better. If you're upset that people have light bulbs that you think are hurting the environment, but you're flying around on a private jet, shut your mouth. Shut up. How much money, right? But this goes with everything with socialism. How much money do you really need to live a year? Let's say $150,000 per person per household. So if you're a husband and wife, $300,000. As someone who has never made over $50,000 a year, that seems like plenty to me. I get by just fine on $50,000. But I understand in different areas of the world it costs more to live. So, or different areas of the country. So let's say $150,000. So before you tell me about needing to redistribute my wealth and other people's wealth, why don't you give up all of your money beyond that $150,000? And then once you do that, I'm willing to talk. Before you tell me that my vehicle is bad for the environment, why don't you stop flying in your private jet? And before you tell me that the air conditioner in my house is killing the world, why don't you sell your extra houses that you have? Extra houses? I'm 35 years old. I had to bust my hump and go in extreme debt just to buy this house that I'm proud of. And you have the nerve to tell me and people like me that we're the problem? And it is always the poor and the middle class that bear the brunt of this. Ironically, the very groups they're claiming would benefit the most from this. Remember Cash for Clunkers? Right? And the idea was, oh, okay, we have all these old cars. And they're bad. They didn't have catalytic converters, and they're bad. They're emitting more than newer cars. So we need to get a way to get them off the street. Well, the government will agree to buy these old cars at a price. It sounded good. You know who had the majority of those old cars? People in areas like where I live, rural places where people drove around those old cars. So bam, you got a short-term financial boon. You had one of those old cars, you turned it in, great. Now I got a brother that's 21, is it 22 now? Sister-in-law is 22, sister's 15. When I was young, I was able to buy an old car for like $500, cruise it around. Now it's hard to find those cars when you're poor. Cash for Clunkers. We took them all and we junked them. So now what do you do if you're poor and you need to afford a vehicle? Well, you finance it. How's that treat you? Not good. Now instead of paying $500, you're paying $5,000. Now that's not always the case. You can still find cheap cars here and there. Newbies, one of the things I pride myself in is being able to spot trolls. So I get it, you're doing a good job, but if you're going to troll, the Eat Baby stuff's good. That's a good troll with it, Oh, I think I know who DJ Cole is now. But these policies, they always end up, do you really think, again, if they drive, one of the things you would have to do if you want to drive the prices up of fossil, if you want renewables, there's two ways you could go about it. and you want the government to intervene. Either A, the government could heavily subsidize the renewables, which means that they have to increase your taxes. Period. They'll need money to do that. They either increase your taxes or they print more money, which means the value of your dollar is worth less. Either way, you're paying for it. The people that pay for it proportionally more are the people with the less money. In other words, if you have $10 and the value of the dollar is cut in half, you're affected more than the guy that has $1 million. Well, it's the same. The other thing you could do is you could subsidize the renewables, or you could tax the vice, which in this case would be the fossil fuel. So if gas goes up to $7 a gallon, do you think Hollywood cares? Do you think Leo DiCaprio or Nancy Pelosi or AOC care? They don't care. Why would they? No big deal. Do you think the person that's making $14 an hour and has to drive to work every day, you think they care? That their cost of transportation's just doubled? That's a big deal to that person. Well, that's okay. We'll just tax the rich and give that person more money. It doesn't work that way. Let's go on. Climate change constitutes a direct threat to the national security of the United States, impacting economic, environmental, and social stability of countries and communities around the world and acting as a threat multiplier. I mean, this is just insanity. So I guess if I'm trying to be generous to them, the argument would be this. Say you have a country like China that has a capable military, but then climate change makes them desperate. So then they attack another country for resource wars, right? Would be the idea behind this. Well, economic destruction also causes that. So if you severely impede the economic strength of the United States, that makes war and national security more threatened. This is, and I know the type of people that write this legislation. I'm telling you, they were like the people in debate. We did this all the time. Type anything in the box right now. Right? Type in some kind of thing we need to solve. Food price. Let's just say food prices. Well, here's the problem. If we don't control food prices, it'll affect every area. It'll affect our economy because it'll collapse our economy. It affects our national security because, one, the economy will collapse, which causes us to be more likely to go into other countries. And second, when people aren't being able to eat as much, that makes them more violent and they'll go out. So that increases domestic violence. That'll increase racial hate crimes because people that are hungry have more hate crimes. That's also going to increase climate change because people, when they don't have as much food, will go out and exploit the environment. That'll also lead to overfishing and things like that. Will hurt the oceans. See how easy it is? You can say that with literally anything. Election security? Well, if we don't have election security, it'll make climate change worse because when we don't believe in our government, that means we're not going to listen to their regulation policies, so we'll go out and we'll pollute more. And it'll hurt the economy because when people don't have faith in elections, that means that they're not going to have faith in the economic system, which means they won't do things like pay taxes as much, which will have a negative impact on the economy, which means it's more likely that we go to war, which means that it's more likely to have a nuclear... It's easy. You can do it with anything. It's not a game. They just say, oh, climate change affects everything in the world, so we have to solve it. Okay, the federal government led mobilizations during World War II and the New Deal created the greatest middle class that the United States has ever seen. That's not true. You go back and look, there's great evidence that the New Deal actually kept the Depression going for an extra 20 years. Actually, the most economically successful period of time in our country was when we had something called the greenback system. That was before we had a Federal Reserve. So Benjamin Franklin once was asked, and Benjamin Franklin was basically this rock star over in Europe and in the UK. He'd go to these crazy parties and hook up with all these ladies and get drunk all the time. And one time they asked him, they were like, how is it that this newly budding country that you're from, the United States, is doing so well economically? And Ben Franklin said, well, it's easy. We print our own money. You borrow your money from private banks. That's basically what led to the War of 1812 because the banks in Europe said, you can't print your own money. You have to borrow from us. And so we had a war. And then the entire history of our country in the 17 and 1800s was battling private banks. I think it was Thomas Jefferson said, more than any outstanding army, the biggest threat to our country would be allowing a private banking sector to take the power. William Jennings Bryan gave this speech called the Cross of Gold speech. What that speech was about, when was this? Like 1890s, I think? What that speech was about was he was saying that he was running to have a silver standard because at that time we had a gold standard. So at this point, what the banks decided to do was they were going to buy all of the world, like countries' gold up and then release and contract and increase the supply of gold so that they can control the value of money. If you could control inflation and deflation, then you'd stand to make big bucks. So William Jennings Bryan and a bunch of people were like, no, the biggest issue is we need to go to a silver standard because the banks don't have all this silver. Well, then in 1913, Woodrow Wilson, who was backed by these bankers, on Christmas Eve, you can read about this, it's in a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. But I think it was on Christmas Eve they held a vote, and that passed two things. One, the Federal Reserve, and second, the income tax. The Federal Reserve is the bank that prints all of our money. It's not federal. It's not a government agency. It's owned by private interest. So we now borrow money from a private bank. Money is now called fiat currency. It used to be if you had a dollar bill, it would say this dollar is redeemable in gold. But it doesn't say that anymore. Right? Now it says this is a note of debt. If we paid the national debt, do you know how many dollars would be in circulation? 0. Every dollar bill is an IOU to the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, like, let's just make it real simple. Let's say we started with $0 and we go to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, can we have $10,000? And they say, sure. But you have to pay it back at the end of the year. And it's going to be at 5% interest. Okay. So the government takes that $10,000 and gives it out to all the people. And at the end of the year, the Federal Reserve calls and says, oh, okay, we want our $10,000 back. Plus you owe us an extra $500 on top of that. And the government goes, oh, well, we only have 10,000. We don't have the 10,500. And by the way, can we have another 10,000? And the Federal Reserve goes, okay, we'll give you another 10,000, but it's going to be on interest as well. Anyways, kind of just a little lesson about the Federal Reserve. By the way, after that happened, every recession and depression we've had since then can almost be directly linked to the Federal Reserve. Now they just say it's normal. You just have recessions and depressions. No, it's not the way it used to be. We had a period of unprecedented growth before that. And the policies during the unprecedented growth were limited government policies. The more the government got involved, the more things got economically hazardous, put it that way. So this argument, during the New Deal. So this is what they say they're going to do. Create millions of good high-wage jobs in the United States. They also will destroy every job in the energy sector. Second, to provide unprecedented levels of prosperity and economic security for all people of the United States. Sure, I could pass a bill that says, by the way, my bill, if we pass this bill that names this post office after me, it'll cure all disease. Yeah, so I get that they have no proof of this. They're just making a claim. And it also will counteract systemic, remember what they said, systemic racial, gender injustices. So they admit that's what their plan. Their plan is a form of reparations, they're admitting. Resolved, that it is the sense of the House of Representatives that, 1, it is the duty for the federal government to create a Green New Deal. A, to achieve net zero gas emissions through a fair and just transition for all communities and workers. What does that mean? Someone tell me what that sentence means. A fair and just transition for all communities and workers? Who defines what's fair and just? Is it different from community to community and worker to worker? If I'm a coal miner, I think fair and just is let me mine coal. So this is garbage. They make it sound like this is somehow the will of the people or the input of the people. It's not. It's government overreach and having massive control over this. Second, to create millions of good high-wage jobs and ensure prosperity and economic security for all people in the United States. I already talked about that. Third, to invest in the infrastructure and the industry of the United States to sustainably meet the challenges of the 21st century. In other words, switch everything to renewables. D, to secure for all people of the United States generations to come clean air and water. That's fine. We could do things to affect that right now. They're not. Instead, they're pushing this massive $1 trillion plan. They could be out there saying, hey, let's go to Flint and fix the water. Hey, let's go to this place and fix the water. But they're not. Second, climate and community resiliency. I have no idea what community resiliency means. That's more reparation. Every time they use the word community, what they're saying is that they're different. There's the white community and the black community. which is bad in its own right to split us up like that. It just creates divisions. But what the heck are they even trying to talk about here? 3, healthy food. Okay, what? So is this a mandate to end potato chips? Again, it's more about them controlling your life. Sorry. Access to nature. How do you secure for all people access to nature more than we already have? Is there anyone who doesn't have access to nature right now? Like, is the government physically prohibiting you from going to the woods? You might say, well, you live in the city. You can't make it to the woods. What is their plan going to do to change that? You won't even own a car. How you get into the woods? A sustainable environment. Whatever. E, to promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppressions of indigenous peoples, communities of colors, migrant communities, deindustrialized communities, depopulated rural communities, the poor, low income, women, elderly, unhoused, people with disabilities, and youth. Hereby referred to as frontline and vulnerable communities. That's E, so let me read it, how it's written here. Resolved. It is the sense of the U.S. House of Representatives that it is the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal to promote justice and equity by stopping current and preventing future and repairing historic oppression of all of these groups. What in God's name does that have to do with the climate? That means reparations is what they're saying. That means that we say the government gives you more based on your victimhood group. That's cultural Marxism. That's what I was describing earlier. That's why I went off on it. This is garbage. It creates more division. And we could talk about this, right? Like, for example, the war on poverty was designed to be a benefit to inner city communities, right? And what happened after the war on poverty? Things gotten better? No. By most measures, inner cities have gotten worse. So do people say the war on poverty didn't work? They say, no, we need more. That's the problem. It's still slavery. It's still slavery. Give us more. That's exactly what this is. The goals described in subparagraphs A through E of the paragraph referred to in this resolution as Green New Deal's goals should be accomplished through 10-year national mobilization that will require the following goals and projects. And I'll stop after this because this is boring to me. It's just such nonsense. So we got 10 years to do the following. Got it? A, building resiliency against climate change-related disasters, such as extreme weather, including by leveraging funding and providing investments for community-defined projects and strategies. Okay, so levees, ability to fight wildfires, things like that. We do that. But I guess they're just going to do it more is the idea. Notice how it's vague. So if we pass this resolution, we have no idea. We know we have 10 years to accomplish this. How much money is it going to take? How much effort is it? Well, we don't know any of that. Second, repairing and this one's a doozy. Repairing and upgrading the infrastructure in the United States, including 1, eliminating pollution and greenhouse gas emissions as much as technologically feasible. What does that mean? Right now, we're basically eliminating as much as technologically feasible. That's what the status quo is. See, they included this because before they said get rid of all cars and all things that operate off fuel. And people were like, okay, do you see any electric-powered airplanes? And they were like, we might have them. We could. So now anytime you'll be like, look, this is crap, they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, that area is crap, but the rest of it, well, this is crap. Well, okay, that area is crap, but the rest of it, what do you mean technologically feasible? I thought you said we'd be out of fossil fuels in 10 years. So wouldn't that be what's technologically feasible? Second, guaranteeing universal access to clean water. Yeah, we should do that. So why are we not focused on that? See, here's the problem. If there's an issue, our government sucks, right? I'm sure you all knew this. And I mean all parties, right? They can't do the simplest thing. They can't run a VA, right? But they want to run the entire country's health system. They can't get clean water in Flint, Michigan, but they want to control the entire country's environmentalism and economic system, energy system. Why don't we focus on clean water? That's great. I'm with you 100%. There should not be one citizen of this country that goes without clean water. I'm there. I'm with you. What does reparations have to do with that? What does all this other crap have to do with that? If you really cared about clean water as much as I do, you'd say, yes, that's the bill. Clean water bill. Bam, get it done. Done. Okay, next thing. But instead you're like, nah, it's on par with, taking money from Group A and giving it to Group B. That's also important. Reducing the risks posed by climate impacts, whatever, and ensuring that any infrastructure bill considered by Congress addresses climate change. So in other words, we have an infrastructure bill that wants to replace the roads. It's got to talk about climate change. Bridge fell apart in your state? Need to replace that bridge? Well, we have to talk about climate change. That wasn't the section I thought it was. There's one coming up that I've talked about this and people said I was lying. You'll see. C, meaning 100% of the power demand in the United States through clean, renewable, and zero-emission energy sources. That's not feasible. They don't include nuclear one, which is absurd. We nowhere near have the infrastructure right now with solar or wind or even tidal to have 100% renewable. It's just not going to happen in 10 years. It's not going to happen. It says dramatically expanding, upgrading renewable power sources and deploying new capacity. It's just, it's a dream. You might as well pass a bill that says we will end all domestic violence in 10 years. It's like, you could say that, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. At the end of the 10 years, if our grid is not totally renewable, then what? We just yank all fossil fuels? Sorry. Oh, you still live in a rural area where you're still running on a coal power plant? Sorry, no power for you. Don't worry, we'll get some turbines out there soon. This is the doozy. D. Building or upgrading to energy efficient, distributed, and smart power grids. Oh, no, that's not it either. It's the next one. And ensuring affordable access to electricity. Okay, whatever. This one is my favorite. Upgrading all existing buildings in the United States and building new buildings to achieve maximum energy efficiency, water efficiency, safety, affordability, comfort, and durability, including through electrification. So for example, I bought this house, I got a mortgage payment, I'm working through it. There's some things that I find that could be more comfortable in my house. I need maximum comfort. Luckily, the Green New Deal is going to upgrade all existing buildings in the United States for comfort. Isn't that wonderful? Do you have any idea what the bill is? Every building in the United States will now be upgraded. Energy efficient, water efficient, will be safe, will be affordable for comfort and durability. House is falling down. Green New Deal says, guess what? The government's coming in to make sure your house is more durable. Make sure it's more comfortable. Make sure it's maximum energy. Do you have any idea? Let's say, I don't even know. I would guess in the town I live in, there are, let's just say conservatively, 1,000 buildings. And let's say somehow it takes $10,000 to upgrade every building. So for my little town, let's see, 10,000, 1,000. So now we got, that's $10 million to upgrade my town. One small town, 10 million for this town. Let's just say in this county there's, 100 towns the size of mine. So that's, now we got, let's see. Now we got $1 billion. That's $1 billion for my county. How many counties do you think there are in the country? and this is a brutally conservative number, it says every building. That's barns that are falling down. Old factories that are dormant. Every building is going to have access to water and electric and comfort and durability. It says that. Who endorsed this plan? Just fringe people, right? Now I talk to my friends and I'm like, oh my God, how much would Bernie's plans or AOC's plan or Elizabeth Warren's plans cost? It will cost us into the hundreds of trillions. And they're like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I said, just give me an estimate. How much do you think it costs to revamp every building in the United States? And they say, no, we just have to redo the factories. No, that's not what this says. Every building. And not just to make sure that it can hook up to the new type of electricity for comfort, for durability. It's insanity. Everybody knows it. Everyone knows it's like, that's ridiculous. I could go on. Reparations, buildings for comfort, guaranteed federal jobs is another thing it says. Overhauling the transportation system in the U.S. to remove pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. All cars gone. Means zero emission vehicle infrastructure and manufacturing. High-speed rail, public transit. Where are we getting this money? Mitigating and managing the long-term adverse health, economic, and other effects of pollution. Free health care for anyone who could say they have an illness related to pollution. Economic. And you'd say, okay, but no big deal, that should be. And I agree, it should be. If you're drinking tainted water, the government that was responsible for that water should pay you. But they say everything's the result of climate change. So if everything's the result of climate change, and we're going to manage economic and long-term health effects of it, that means everything. They say, for example, that racial discrimination is the result of climate change. So if we're going to manage and mitigate long-term effects of health and economic, that means we have to pay economic for racism. If everything's climate change and they have control over everything related to climate change, that means the government has control over everything. Green New Deal must be developed through transparent, inclusive consultation, collaboration, and partnership with frontline and vulnerable communities, labor unions, worker cooperatives, civil society groups, academia, and business. It'll provide and leverage in a way that ensures public receives appropriate ownership stakes and returns on investment, adequate capital, including through community grants, public banks, and other public financing, technical expertise, supporting policies, other forms of assistance to community organizations, federal, state, local government agencies, business working on Green New Deal mobilization. Public ownership, that means government ownership. That's what they're saying. The government will own all this stuff. Provide resources, training, and high-quality education, including higher education, to all peoples of the United States. Free education for everyone. Free training for whatever you want, with a focus on frontline and vulnerable communities. If you're a woman, if you're young, if you're indigenous, if you're black, if you're disabled, you get special benefits. If you're in none of those oppressive groups, sorry, eat it. See if any other highlights. Ensuring the use of democratic and participatory processes that are inclusive of and led by frontline and vulnerable communities and workers. That means we have to ensure that minority populations are leading this. What does that have anything to do with anything? Guaranteeing a job with a family-sustaining wage, adequate family and medical leave, paid vacations, and retirement security to all peoples of the United States. Now the government's going to guarantee you a job, and it's going to be a family-sustainable wage. What is that? Well, they're pushing for $15, $20 an hour, so the government's going to guarantee, let's say, $20 an hour job to everyone in the United States. Guaranteed, you get that job. Where are we getting the money for this? It's just... Done with that crap. Let me make my face bigger again. I know you're all tired of not seeing me as well. That's the Green New Deal. So we're 2 hours in. What does this have to do with what happened yesterday? Is eating babies that ridiculous? We're all dead. We're all dead in 10 years. We need to... It's going to cost us hundreds of billions of dollars if we don't do everything that they suggest. Their plan cost infinity, binity, doesn't matter. We'll just print monopoly money. Free jobs for everyone, sustainable health, free healthcare, free education. We'll revamp every one of your houses and every building for comfort and durability. Who defines comfort? I think central air is comfort. I don't have central air. Maybe I will vote for this. It'd be nice for the government to come in and give me central air. That'd be great. But Rob, you won't be able to afford the bill. Nah, don't worry. Renewable energy will cost next to nothing. And I'm already guaranteed. I make 14 something an hour right now. The government will guarantee me a job making more than that. Who pays for government guaranteed jobs? Well, they collect taxes and then they create the job. So let's just say $15 an hour. I don't make $15 an hour right now. Somehow you're going to tax people to pay everyone $15 an hour. But if everyone's working for the government making this money, where do we get the taxes from to pay the rest of the people from the government? Is eating babies that ridiculous? When it comes to that? Now the narrative is, oh, we knew some lefty wouldn't say something like that. Really? Did you know some lefty wouldn't firebomb an ICE facility? Let's see. You are in Antifa and you're upset about ICE detaining illegal immigrants. And so your solution is to make Molotov cocktails and throw it at the detention facility. Now, I'm no genius, but I think that had that building lit up really bad, the people most likely to be harmed would be those under lock and key, which are the very illegals that you're claiming to save. The same group that brought you that could probably bring you, we need to eat the babies to make sure that the environment's good for the babies when they grow up. I don't see it being that much of a stretch. It is in the realm of believability. And you say, no, it couldn't be. If I'd have told you 10 years ago that peer-reviewed scientists would be saying, we need to resort to cannibalism. We have to end all cows. You'd have said I was nuts. If I would have told you 10 years ago that the prevailing thought in the public narrative would have been, there is no biological difference between men and women, you would have said I was nuts. There's no way. There's no way anyone could believe that. So is this proposition any more ridiculous? We were just told, right, just 3 months ago, we were told this. The pro-life movement's a white power movement. So if you really want to get against the white power movement, you should support abortion, which disproportionately kills black babies. That goes against every piece of logic. If you really hate black people, you're probably for a practice that kills the babies before they're born. Probably. I don't know. That's how insane they are. It is now feminist to attack mothers. By the way, with the advent of this new third wave feminism, and more women getting involved in the workforce and being encouraged to do what they want and being encouraged not to have children, every measure shows as their economic mobility rises and all of this happens, every study they do about the happiness of women declines and declines and declines. It's truly the world of 1984. 2 + 2 = 5. War is peace. You can't call it illegal alien in New York City. You could make stuff up. We could have the Inspector General of this country say that the head of the FBI and other people at the FBI broke protocol to the point where they were criminally referred. In other words, they broke the law to go after one candidate. And the prevailing narrative from the establishment left and the people that control our public dialogue, that's the mainstream media, the entertainment industry, academia, Silicon Valley. Their message on this is, who cares? We don't care. And if Trump tries to investigate that corruption, he's breaking the law. Yeah, I mean, for those of you that missed the beginning of this video, this is what this was about. I basically just went on for 2 hours on why the position of someone saying we should eat babies. Of course it was a troll, but it was a great troll. Because the most effective satire is satire that becomes believable because the other position's so ridiculous. Obama, Comey, the intel community's Hillary, they could get dirt on Trump from the Ukraine, but Trump investigating that dirt is a crime. Every single thing they say. It's not just, it's wrong. It's the opposite of the truth. I mean, it's surreal. So yeah, that's my feelings on the Green New Deal and AOC. You know, this is, and my prediction is, I was busy before I started the video today, but my prediction is this, that now that we know that this was some sort of troll, that this will be spun as like, of course the noble leftists, the noble AOCs of the world would never suggest something like this, and this is clearly just a perversion by the right wing that's ignoring everything they say, and these evil right-wingers and blah, blah, blah. You watch that video again. A room full of people that didn't, again, switch it. Take a Republican issue. You know, Republicans are concerned about economic growth. You have someone in there say, yes, the problem is there's too many poor people. We need to start shooting poor people. Do you think that Republican would be like, I understand your frustration, and it is a serious issue, you know, but don't lose hope. There's things we can do. Do you think that's how that would be treated? They'd say, get out. It's repugnant. But not with these folks. Yeah, right, Michelle. Women are men now. And the lies that they purport actually directly harm the people they're claiming to help. And you see this, they constantly contradict themselves. The feminist movement, do you know why there's a big, hubbub about transgenderism? Because a lot of the old school feminists don't buy the transgender arguments. And here's why. A feminist used to be making this argument that women are special. For all sorts of reasons. The transgender argument is, women aren't special, you merely choose to be a woman. And so feminists, some of the smart ones were like, whoa, you can't do that, right? Our entire argument for years has been how all the great things about being a woman. We want equal rights, or some feminists wanted more than equal rights, which is ridiculous, but women are good. And now there is no such thing as a woman. A woman's just a label that you put on yourself. Girl's just a label. So they clash. What happened? A lot of the old school feminists are getting deplatformed. You can't say that. You can't say that transgender's not a woman. They say they're a woman, so they're a woman. And if they want to box against women or lift weights against women, we have to pretend that they don't have a competitive advantage. We have to pretend that. And so ironically, the people like me that fought against the absurdity of feminism, there's part of you that just wants to go, yep, get them transgenders, you got it, man, you're right. And that's a lot of times how you deal with this. You just become more woke. Right? Here's one, right? If I'm to believe all this transgender and feminist crap, right? If I'm to believe it, you remember the Kavanaugh story? Here's the story with Kavanaugh, the new one that came out in the New York Times, right? He was at a party and he had his pants off for whatever reason. We don't know why. Was he aggressively removing his pants in front of other people? Was he at his home sleeping? Was it his place? Was other people nude? We don't know. All we know is he was nude. Someone forcibly grabs his genitals. That's sexual assault, right? That's sexual assault. They grabbed his genitals. Then they pushed it into a woman's hand. That story was then said by Elizabeth Warren, by Tulsi Gabbard, by Bernie, all these people. Impeach Kavanaugh. Now let's change the gender for a minute. A woman's at college. She's topless. Someone grabs her breast and shoves it in another man's hand. Is that woman then guilty of sexual assault? They would say, my God, who was the guy that grabbed her breast? That's sexual assault against that woman. But you change the genders. Now, right? The first story with Kavanaugh, the first story was Christine Blasey Ford. The second story was this woman Ramirez. Her allegation was quite simply that Brett Kavanaugh exposed himself. That was the allegation, right? That we're told that this woman Ramirez's story was that hurt her the rest of her life. That him whipping it out, right, affected her the rest of her life. That's what we're told to believe. Yet at the same time, if I go on a college campus and I see women go topless because they're fighting the patriarchy, would anyone take me seriously if I was like, oh my God, I was sexually aggressed against? If any of those women ever seek public office, they should be impeached and removed. Of course not. Constantly changing. When we do it, it's okay. When they do it, it's wrong. Everything you can think of. Make America great again. That's racist. It's racist for Donald Trump to say that. Oh, really? Here we see Bill Clinton saying it in 96. Oh, Bill Clinton likes black people, so it's okay. So yeah, I'm kind of finished with that, the climate change, unless anyone else says anything. No, look, there's a lot of good evidence out there and a lot of good people talking more about the science than me. And I'll admit, I could do a better job of looking into the science. But the big picture is, I'm willing to, even though I'm distrusting of a lot of the scientists, I'm willing to listen to their evidence. However, anytime someone's seeking a massive infringement on your personal freedoms, I'm very skeptical of what they're saying, and the burden of proof is on them. And in your attempt to make claims to solve these problems that you're saying, if you're putting forth crap that on face value has nothing to do with what you're claiming, or is undoable, then I'm not going to take it seriously. So that's my feelings on that. And just remember, climate change is being used. Even if you're someone who's massively concerned about climate change, you should understand that people without interest in climate change are using this issue to obtain power and take away your rights. Every country we've seen enact large climate change proposals have resulted in massive transfer of wealth from the lower class to the upper class. So, all right, I wanted to talk a little then about impeachment and whatever. And by the way, I know that one person asked me this, but Green New Veal was the best pun about this. I saw people say, what did they say? A modest Green New Deal or a modest proposal deal. right? And that's from the old Jonathan Swift satire. And that's another reason that I knew this was a troll. If you've ever read, it's called A Modest Proposal, Jonathan Swift, and he basically gives a recipe for how to eat babies in it. Yeah, and Michelle, you're right. For example, I think, 500 scientists just wrote to the EU saying that there is no climate change crisis. And I mean, you can see, again, there is a consensus as far as this. The climate is changing and humans have something to do with it. But that's the end of the consensus. You could find scientists that say all sorts of things. I don't find myself to be in a position to be researched enough to be able to say, this is why I agree with this scientist over this scientist. So instead, I take a more global picture of it and I see what are the solutions that they're offering and what are the problems that they're saying are going to happen and what is their track record. Well, they yelled the sky is falling since the 70s and it hasn't. And their solutions all disproportionately affect poor and middle class people, and they include a bunch of crap that has nothing to do with the climate. Yeah, that was me, Green New Veal. Great joke, great. So what I'm gonna do, my buddy Tom, I don't know if he's watching this right now, but he came up with it. If you've ever watched Bob's Burgers, he always has like a chalkboard behind him with the burger of the day. So I'm gonna try to get a little chalkboard and write my pun for the name of my video every day behind me. That's my goal anyway. That's long-term Rob goal here. So, well, thank you, newbies. Even though I think you're trolling, I actually think you're funny. I think that it's good trolling. But I won't out you anymore. We'll just assume that you're a normal. You should come on. Like, it's like Copper Cab. Have you ever seen him? The big feminist. What a great troll. He's fantastic. But, newbies, get your Eat Baby, Save the Environment shirt and go to an AOC rally. I would be more than happy to laugh and talk about you. Yeah. So let's talk about the impeachment stuff and the new stuff that's come out about it, because I don't know if I'll be able to do a live stream tomorrow because I have a wedding. So since my last video, here's what's came out. We know for a fact now that it's Democrat. The CIA agent that was whistleblower is a Democrat. We know for a fact that Schiff had access to this complaint beforehand. We know that that was violation of the rules, because the rules say that in order to be a whistleblower, you have to go to the Inspector General. Now, there are procedures where you could go directly to the House Intelligence Chairman. So for those of you that don't understand, why does this process matter? What's going on? Traditionally, let's just assume for a second you're in the government or you're in your job, whatever. Sometimes things happen and you can't go directly to your boss because you think they did something shady, or you see something that your company did that you're not happy with. Well, almost every company, and particularly any government job, so any state job, has procedures that you could follow to be able to report what you find to be abuses. In the government, we call those whistleblowers. So a lot of it, if you read it has a lot to do with like avoiding waste and things like that. And the idea behind it is, a lot of whistleblowing complaints could be like, hey, I saw my boss improperly use this money. That's government money. So you could basically rat your boss out or someone in your agency and have protections to not be able to be fired. But you have to follow these procedures, and they're set up for a reason. So with the intelligence community, the procedure says you go to your Inspector General. Inspector Generals we have in a bunch of different agencies, and their job's basically like, if you think of internal affairs with the police, right? The Inspector General polices that agency. So the Inspector General of the intelligence community kind of polices the intelligence community. The State Department Inspector General kind of polices the State Department, etc. So you go to the police, basically, your IG, and you're like, hey, here's my problem. And then they resolve it. But what if the IG is involved in it? Okay, so there is a procedure to go outside of the department. Now, you can't just go to the press or something. Technically, you're a whistleblower, but you aren't afforded the protections offered to you by the government's policies on this. If you just go straight to the press. Now you're leaking classified information. So you're a leaker, not a whistleblower. Now, me and you might say, but that leak was for good reasons, and that person really is a whistleblower, right? But you're not under the government protection at that point. You have to follow their rules. We can agree or disagree with those rules, but what's important is you have to follow them to be in order to have those protections. This person did not. This person went to Adam Schiff, who's the head of the intel community, who's a Democrat as well. So we have a Democrat CIA agent who goes to Adam Schiff. Remember, this CIA agent did not have the transcript of the call, nor did they hear the call. They just said, I heard rumors. They talk to Schiff. Schiff's office then tells them, get a lawyer. They get this lawyer that's worked for Schumer and the Clintons. This law firm started in 2017. Part of what this law firm does is it suggested paying people for releasing dirt that could hurt Donald Trump. That's the stated mission. Whistleblowers that come out against Trump, they would pay and make sure that they were all right. Okay? So that's where we're at. Now, this whistleblower won't come public, and the media is defending not releasing in public because they could be threatened. And they're a legitimate whistleblower. But in order for them to be someone who's under all these protections, they had to follow the rules. They did not, because the rules state that you have to first give your complaint to the IG. If nothing's acted upon it, you could then go to the IG and say, I'm unsatisfied with this. I'm going to someone in Congress on the Intel Committee. But that didn't happen. He didn't give it to the IG, and he didn't tell the IG that he was unsatisfied. So he improperly leaked evidence. Hey, dogs, quiet down. Now, I said on September 27th, I did a live stream and I did tweets where I said, I found it suspicious that the whistleblower's complaint kept talking about how it was unclassified. And to me, that seemed like... One second, let me deal with these meatheads. Hey. Keep it down. I'm a pushover as a dog owner. But, they had to... Where was I? So, yeah... This whistleblower comes to Schiff, sends it to a Democratic lawyer. So it's all Democrats that are involved with this. Now, we then found out that the forms that were used for whistleblowers said that first-hand knowledge was necessary. They changed that form after this whistleblower came forward. Just changed it just for this whistleblower. Now we find out the IG that said this was an urgent concern. Oh, I'll try to bring him on in a minute. The IG that said it was an urgent concern, reports are now, didn't even read the transcript of the call. Now think about this. You're an inspector general. You acknowledge that there's political bias of the person bringing you this, that they don't like Trump. You acknowledge that most, if not all, of the information is secondhand source. You don't even read the primary source material, but you say, it sounds urgent. Now again, think of what we're talking about here. I could spin a story with any phone call that any president has had as to why it could hypothetically be an urgent situation. I mean, take any. You could say, one time George W. Bush called Putin, right? And I could say, well, I heard from secondhand sources that what Bush was talking about was getting Putin to silence John Kerry and to work with the Swift boat veterans to come out against John Kerry. Does that mean that that's an urgent concern? I mean, the allegation's serious. And I know there was a phone call. But I just say I heard gossip about that. That doesn't make it an urgent concern. The very least the person deciding it is an urgent concern would do is say, let me go check the transcript of this call. Right? Isn't that the first step you would take if you were the IG? But no. Now again, that's just what's being reported. So let's see if that's what comes out. Thanks, newbies. I appreciate it. I really do. So if that's what comes out with the IG... that it turns out they didn't read the transcript. All these coincidences, secondhand knowledge. The IG changed the forms to allow secondhand reporting to be allowed now. This person met with Schiff. Schiff lied about it, said my team never met with this person. Schiff then gets him in touch with the lawyer. They put all this evidence about unclassified. Did you see anyone else talk about that other than me? No. It kept saying unclassified. What did I say about it? This sounds like this will be the defense that the whistleblower eventually uses because he probably gave the information to Schiff. Now we know he did give the information to Schiff. And mark my words, that'll be the defense. It'll be the Comey defense again. When the whistleblower finally comes forward, he'll say, I didn't think I was giving any classified information. I specifically put in my transcript, I thought that everything I talked about with Schiff was unclassified. Therefore, I didn't violate the whistleblower protocol. I'm allowed to talk to who I want about unclassified information. That's what he'll say. I was just repeating stuff I heard in the New York Times. Then Schiff told me that it was a big deal and to file a complaint. But I don't hear anyone talking about that, which I don't know why. You would think that that would stand out to people. Now the big story is, so this guy, So then we have 2 nights. Yeah, why were the rules changed? And I did a whole video on this, right? And so, like, here's some questions I have. What they say is this. They're like, okay, let's go back. Let me talk about this for like 5 minutes because it is important. So for those of you, would you say this is a complicated situation? I understand. And one of the things I try to do with my videos most of the time is try to put the content so that you could just be the guy that's watching the Steeler game with me at the bar and understand what I'm saying, right? I don't want to get too technical with it, right? So it becomes very difficult, these stories, because there's so many names or processes that it becomes difficult. So just bear with me as I try to set the stage. So you have this process to where you could basically grind the government to the halt and have investigations. We know there is a reason, even though people like me would like as much transparency as possible. We all know there are reasons that certain things that our government officials do can't just blatantly be made public all the time. One of those would be conversations with foreign leaders. And it makes sense why, because you could be having all sorts of conversations. One of the things Trump does that people always like crap on him for, but I actually don't think it's a bad idea, he butters up kind of the crappier people. But I think that's because he understands their ego. And so a Kim Jong-un or a Putin or someone, Assad or someone like that, he understands, look, the rest of the Western world treats these people like crap. And maybe they deserve to be treated like crap. But if I stroke their ego a little, I'm more likely to get somewhere with them. Whereas the opposite's true of our allies. When he's talking to Merkel or Macron or someone like that, all Obama did was butter them up and they took advantage of us. So he's telling them, I'm tired of your crap. That's the way he's approaching diplomacy. It's almost like when you pitch, they tell you, always pitch backwards, right? Most people want to throw fastballs early and then breaking balls late in the count. But they're like, if you're a smart pitcher, when they expect you to throw a fastball, you throw a curveball. When they expect you to throw a curveball, you throw a fastball. That's the same way. When our allies expect Trump to butter them up, and Trump's like, no, you should be paying more. Our enemies expect Trump to like come at them like the rest of the Western leaders, and he doesn't. So that's his attempt at diplomacy. Regardless if you agree or not, that's what's going on. Nonetheless, it would behoove Trump, if that's his policy, to not have the world or the public to hear exactly what he's saying to like Kim Jong-un or Putin or whoever. Because he might be saying, I know you get a bad rap, but, we should work together on, ending this trade war. Then all of a sudden the U.S. press would be like, oh, Trump thinks Putin's not a bad guy. And it's not just that, right? Take this conversation we have with the Ukrainian president specifically. In that conversation, Zelensky is saying like, yeah, I'm mad at Merkel. I don't think she's doing as much as she should be. Now, did he want her to know that? Maybe not. There's a lot of, just watch fictional even shows and you can kind of get an idea of it. I watched House of Cards before Kevin Spacey had to leave the show. And they had the Russian president who was like a Putin lookalike. And at one point, Kevin Spacey, who's like, I think at the time president, and his wife are talking to this Putin-type character. And one of the issues they're focusing on is gay rights in Russia. And the Putin character is basically like, look, I don't care. I could care less about if someone's gay or not. I just don't care. But my people do. So they're kind of dumb and I just have to go along with it. Conversations like that probably happen. Maybe not to that level, but like you're talking to the president of Egypt. And the president of Egypt's like, look, I'm with you. I want to do this. But you have to understand that I have public pressure to do X. Because the people want this. Well, the president of Egypt doesn't want his people hearing that he's saying, basically, I agree with you and not my people. But I kind of have to keep in mind what my people say. They don't want to hear that. So so we have to have a system where these conversations can remain private. Because if they're not private, then no foreign leader will ever want to have any meaningful discussion with the president of the United States. It'll just be like, I liken it to when you watch someone like an athlete after the game. They never tell the truth. Like 99% of the time, let's say you're a wide receiver and your quarterback just sucked the whole game. 99% of the time, you're not getting in the cameras after the time and being like, yeah, my quarterback sucked. What do you want? You're like, oh, it's a team effort. We'll get better. We'll try next week. And it was my fault as well. That's what you do. Everybody knows what you're supposed to say. That's what conversations with foreign leaders are going to be like in the future. Because if you're the president of Russia or Egypt or the UK or France or Germany or Australia, wherever, you're going to be like, I can't talk to Trump or whoever the next president is. All it takes is a crazy secondhand report from some whistleblower that doesn't like that president's policies to demand the transcript be released. Then it'll be the biggest news in the media for the next 2 weeks. So, yeah, hey, Trump's on the phone for you. Hey, how you doing, President? Yeah, I wish you well. Oh, what's that? You want to talk about trade policy? Well, it's something to discuss at some time, but we really wish you well. Okay, goodbye. That's it. No one's going to deal with him in a private manner. Imagine if you knew every conversation you have with your coworker is being recorded and could be released at a moment's notice. You think you'd talk differently? You think you'd have open and honest conversations about how your company's being ran? Of course not. That's why there are limitations on what the whistleblower protections are. Because you don't want a system where anyone for any reason could be like, I feel that transcript should be released. I'm in the CIA, I feel that way. That would be absurd. So we have a law, but you want to have protections for whistleblowers. That's important too. Because you could see something corrupt going on, and you don't want it to be like pretty much every whistleblower like under Obama, where you're basically ostracized and imprisoned for outing corruption. So you have to run that fine line. So the way the law is written, it says, I'm pseudo-libertarian. I ran as a Republican, but I'm definitely for limited government as much as possible. I think the Libertarian Party's gone nuts with the open borders crap, but whatever. Okay, so the way the law is written for the statute, it says it gives a bunch of criteria for exactly how you could go about to procure these whistleblower protections, right? So here's how... When something's done like that, there still has to be... You get the letter of the law and exactly what it was, but there's still a determination that's made at some point, right? So, for example, take a law like disorderly conduct. That law is written in your local state or wherever you live. But it's still up, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to the judge or the officer arresting for you whether or not what you did meets the threshold of that. So there's a bunch of stuff written that says, this is the stuff you could do to be a whistleblower. Okay? It does not specifically say first-hand knowledge is necessary, but it does say that the IG has to find the complaint urgent in order to take the steps that were taken in this instance. All right, so I've set the stage. The old forms that were publicly available that were created on May 4th, 2018, specifically say first-hand knowledge required. And then there's a big long paragraph and it says, if you only have secondhand knowledge, you can't be a whistleblower. You could encourage the person you heard it from to be a whistleblower and file a report with the IG, which makes sense. That's what the form said. Okay? Would you think it's suspicious if that form was changed after this current whistleblower who didn't have first-hand knowledge? In other words, every whistleblower before them was told, sorry, this won't fly. But for this one whistleblower that was against Trump, they said, we'll change the rules and now we allow it. I am very non-aggression principle-esque in most cases. Do no harm. That's basically my idea. But I'll talk about that at length some other day. So, that's where we're at with this. That seems like it would be reason for suspicion to me. Imagine if it's Trump. Imagine it's on the other hand, right? And somehow this is an agency that Trump has personal control over, right? And imagine Trump says, it used to be for us to start an investigation into someone, we need first-hand material evidence of wrongdoing. But we've changed the rules because this guy that just came out says that he heard Biden did some corrupt stuff. So now we're going to start an investigation into Biden. Imagine what would happen if that occurred. People would say, wait, what? You just changed the rules to go after Biden? Now, we know this person's a partisan, they're registered as a Democrat, and we know they talked with Schiff before they filed the complaint. So the fact that the rules would be changed just to go after Trump, just another coincidence, right? When we saw all these other people in the intel agency. Remember, and I just heard more about this on Tucker's show last night. I talk about this a lot, but I got more of this specific detail coming back to me listening to his show. Trump gets elected, but he's still not in office, right? So he wins the election in November. He's waiting to get in office. During that period, at one point, the evidence of the Russia investigation starts. Trump texts out something effective. I think the intel agencies are crap, looking into the Russia stuff, blah, blah, blah. Chuck Schumer goes on Rachel Maddow's show. As soon as this text comes out, Maddow's like, hey, Mr. Schumer, they're reporting this text from Trump where he's kind of insulting the intelligence community. Schumer says in response, Trump's supposed to be this smart businessman, but this isn't a very smart move. If you go after the intel community, they'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. Now, I've said, I don't know how many times on this channel and to other people, I don't care if you like Trump, if you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Conservative, Green Party, Constitutionalist, whatever your political affiliation, the fact that one of the major parties' leader is admitting on national television that his opponent, the duly elected president, who's supposed to be the most powerful person in the country and in the free world, has to be fearful of unelected bureaucrats because they will take him down is unbelievably mind-blowing. Every single person should be like, what? Is that true? And of course, people like me knew that was true. That's why I voted for Trump, because the intel community and the deep state's so corrupt. And I was called a conspiracy theorist. No, you're stupid. Come on, Rob. Really? You believe that crap? Chuck Schumer believes it. He told you. You just chose to ignore him. So it just so happened Schumer told us the intel community is going to get Trump back for criticizing him. And then we had Brennan. And we had Clapper. Then we had Comey. Then we had Strzok. Then we had Page. Then we had Rebecca. Then we had Baker. Then we had McCabe. Did I say him already? Maybe I did. All the leaks that came out from the intel community. Bruce Orr and people like that at the DOJ that was working with the intel community. Working with Christopher Steele. FISA warrants that were unverified used to spy. Unmasking of people. All of that we had. And just coincidentally now, they changed the rules just to allow a registered Democrat CIA agent that's working with Adam Schiff to finally be the first person that's allowed to use secondhand gossip as the reason to start an impeachment proceeding. And no one finds that suspicious. Or, rather, there were many of us that found that suspicious. We said, wait a minute. And this is what Sean Davis from the Federalist, I saw on Twitter, was the first I saw to say this. Was like, wait a minute. This looks really suspicious. It looks like according to my research, it looks like first-hand knowledge was required. And then they were like, oh, no, here's the form. And then everyone was like, whoa, it looks like this form was changed in August. So in other words, this form was changed and then like a day later, this whistleblower complaint that now qualifies under that form was released. That was the suspicion. So the IG releases a statement. And not only was the suspicion confirmed, it was actually more than confirmed. It was worse than what we saw. The form didn't change until after the whistleblower complaint. The whistleblower actually used this old form and checked the box that they had first-hand knowledge. Which is ridiculous. We know they didn't. How many things were wrong? Remember, what was it first reported? There was a promise made in the phone call. You've seen the transcript. Was there a promise? He said that Trump requested the DNC server from the Ukraine. You saw the transcript. Did he say that? He said that State Department official Brubaker was in on the conversation. Brubaker came out and said, I was never there. So he's wrong. He was wrong with all this stuff. But the IG, without reading the transcript now, it's being alleged, was like, this sounds believable to me. I read stuff in the New York Times. And so it turned out that the form changed after the whistleblower complaint. That seems really suspicious. Now this, to me, then this next part of the story this is even more ridiculous. So this IG releases that statement that confirms what Sean Davis was saying, and other people like me was like, wow, this looks bad. If they changed the form, and then around the same time, for the first time, the whistleblower complaint that before the form it wouldn't have been accepted, but now after the form suddenly it is. If that occurred right around the same time, that looks incredibly shady. And then the IG releases a statement that proves that's exactly what happened. And the media starts posting the IG statement and says, ha ha ha, see, the conspiracy theorists were wrong. When it says in black and white that we were right. They do this all the time. Like, I love these fact checkers. I did a video on this at one point. These fact checkers will say, it's like we have to believe, and people will cite this to you. Like Snopes. Well, Snopes says that's not true. Okay, that's not an argument. Snopes sucks. I could look at 10 to 15 times, like, in 5 minutes it would take me 15 instances, I have them written down somewhere, of cases Snopes was dead wrong on. So tell me, I'll listen to you. I'm not saying I just won't listen to the source, but tell me why Snopes says it's wrong. That's what's important to me. Don't just make this appeal to authority. Well, Snopes is always right and Snopes says it's wrong. What does Snopes say was wrong about it? The same with PolitiFact and their fact checkers. Well, they're fact checkers. They must be telling the truth. What they'll do is they'll say, well, yes, this is true, but what Trump meant by saying that is wrong. Therefore, it's false. That's not what facts are. That's you assuming Trump's intent and saying his intent is wrong. But that doesn't mean the facts are wrong. So they say, well, this was wrong because everyone was assuming it was shady. But the IG report shows why it wasn't shady. Therefore, people were wrong. No, we weren't wrong. We were exactly right with what we alleged. This statement proves it. And you're just saying we don't care because we trust the IG. Yeah, you're right about Snopes. They're horribly politically motivated. So, that doesn't prove that what was said was unfactual. And this occurs over and over. This is what you see with the, right? So then after that, so all that's bad enough, right? That seems incredibly shady. And we're learning all this. Met with Schiff, went against protocol. They changed the policy to allow them. Maybe the IG didn't even read the transcript. Then 2 days ago, right? Might have been 3 nights ago at this point, but in one evening, it came out. Oh, the State Department Inspector General is having an urgent meeting. Check my video out on this. I did just yesterday or the day before. And Lawrence O'Donnell from MSNBC, and it wasn't just him, that's just who I happen to use. And former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, oh, this is a big deal. This state IG, Hinkle, I think is his name, he's really good. He's document-oriented. He's going to have documents. He's going to have the proof. If he's calling an urgent meeting, this must be important. What do you think, former Democratic intel person? Oh, my goodness. Who knows what could be? Another whistleblower, perhaps? Oh, this is going to be really huge. An urgent meeting, these rarely happen. So, this guy's good, and he thinks this is really important. And what are the documents he releases? A bunch of stuff that proves that the Ukraine meddled in the 2016 election, including with Biden. Fast forward back to the MSNBCs and the CNNs of the world, and what do they say? He gave them a bunch of propaganda garbage that's been debunked about Biden and about the Ukraine. What happened to the good guy? What happened to he knows what he's doing? Now all of a sudden it's propaganda garbage that's all been debunked. Really? What was debunked about it? It's just like I was saying about the fact-checking. What was debunked? Well, everyone says it was debunked. Well, what? Well, let's take the Biden situation. You say this over and over. Did Hunter Biden work for this oligarch that everyone said was corrupt? Yep. Did he have any experience in the gas field? Nope. Did he have any experience in Ukraine? No. Did he get $83,000 a month? Yep. Do we have any idea what expertise he had that would warrant that? Nope. Does it turn out that most people that sit in the board of directors, even in legitimate companies, make way less than that? Yep. Okay, so we know all that. Now, do we know that the guy on paper that was investigating that was a man by the name of Viktor Shokin in the Ukraine? Yep. Okay, so far, everyone agrees on all these facts. These aren't disputed. Do we know that Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion unless that Shokin guy got fired? Yep. Do we know that Ukraine, according to Joe Biden's own words, said, we don't have to listen to you and fire that guy, you're not the president? Yep. Do we know that Biden said, go ahead and call Obama? I'm going to leave in 6 hours and you're not going to get the money? Yes, we know that. And do we know finally then they decided to fire Shokin? Yes. Okay. All those, again, everyone's agreeing with all those facts. Biden used $1 billion of your tax dollars to extort the government of the Ukraine to fire a prosecutor who happened to be looking into his son. Factual. Absolute factual. CNN, Jake Tapper, the New York Times, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, George Stephanopoulos, all these people, they say that's debunked. It's debunked. What do you mean it's debunked? We just agreed. Those are the facts. Do you dispute any of those facts? No, I don't dispute them. Okay, then how is this debunked? Well, because you're saying that your interpretation is this shows something corrupt, and it wasn't corrupt, so therefore it's debunked. Okay, but it's not debunked. The facts are as I outline them. It's just your opinion based on nothing that it's not corrupt. That's what you're saying. But the facts are as I've outlined them. Now, I would think that any reasonable American, if you take the name Biden or Trump or Ukraine, whatever, if you take all that out, that every reasonable American should be able to agree on this. If you have an executive branch official that is threatening with large sums of your tax dollars to get a foreign official fired, and it turns out, whether it be the reason for that firing or not, that foreign official happened to be investigating the American person who's using that money to get them fired, son, that's reason for an investigation. I don't care if the name's Trump or Biden or Bush or Clinton or Perot, Romney, McCain, it doesn't matter. That's it. That should be a bare minimum threshold. If you're that official, if you're Joe Biden, and you're really honest, and you're like, so wait, my job's to stop corruption in the Ukraine. That's my job. But I'm the point man. In fact, that's so much my job that we will not give them aid until we have proof that they're outing this corruption. And I think this Zlochevsky guy's corrupt. My son works for Zlochevsky. I'm forcing the prosecutor looking into my son to be fired. If Joe Biden was honest, he'd say, yeah, that looks really bad. That looks incredibly bad. And so I don't mind people saying that they want to investigate, but hey, I'm innocent, so investigate away. If you are a real journalist, you would investigate. Without any other, it doesn't matter what excuses Biden gives, or Hunter Biden gives, or anyone else in the world gives. It does not matter. Period. That's it. That's the only facts you need. I'm going to talk to the people involved. I'm going to at least ask Biden and his son and the fired prosecutor about this. At least get their take. At least look into it a little, right? Not only do they not believe that, they think that Trump trying to look into it is criminal and he deserves to be impeached. That's how insane these people are. That's just the base minimum, the bare minimum. That ignores all the evidence we have that there was corruption on top of it. Or there could have possibly been corruption. Like, for example, Hunter Biden getting the $83,000 a month. Very suspicious. Why would someone with no expertise get more than 4 times what an average board of director person on a gas company would get? Seems suspicious. Or how about the fact that the actual fired prosecutor swore in an affidavit that they were told that they were forced out because Biden wanted to bury the investigation? That's evidence. Or how about the fact that the defense attorney, John Beretta, for Burisma, Hunter Biden's company that was ran by this oligarch, it's said in statements given by the interim prosecutor to have said Joe Biden lied, that Shokin wasn't corrupt. Isn't that evidence worth investigating? And listen, I've been saying this. I don't hear anyone saying this. The threshold is not that Trump or me or that Rudy Giuliani or that Sean Hannity or Dan Bongino, it's not that we have to prove that Biden's guilty or that Hunter Biden's guilty. That's not the threshold. The threshold is we have to prove that there's evidence that warrants looking at. And there is. Now, when it came to Trump, it was manufactured. It was garbage. It was unverified from the get-go. The Steele dossier, all this crap. We know it's all crap, right? All of it was crap. Yet that still resulted in a 3-year investigation. They've been looking for Trump's tax returns for 3 years. Why? What are they trying to do? Ask yourself, what does this mean? What theoretically do they think is going to be on the tax returns? What's the big thing? What's the context of why they want the tax returns? Because they want to show hypothetically, that Trump has some sort of connection to Russia. And then they'll make the leap, aha, that means we need to investigate. Because Trump, if he had these tax returns from Russia, and then that proves that Trump's policies towards Russia were beneficial to Russia because he was making money in Russia, and it's a big, it needs to be investigated, it's crazy. That's what they'll have you say. Now that ignores the big thing, which is Trump's been harder on Russia than Obama ever was. But even still, so what? Trump has an international businessman, has business internationally. What's the story? Well, it warrants an investigation, they say. Raises eyebrows. But Hunter Biden, at the same time that his dad was the point man in relations for the Ukraine and China, being involved with corrupt people in those governments making billions of dollars, that's not worth an investigation. It just doesn't pass the smell test. You might be the biggest Joe Biden fan in the world and say, I just don't believe it. He seems like a nice guy. I just don't believe he could be corrupt. And you should still say, but okay, fine. Look into the evidence. That's what they did with Trump. No one said, this is election interference by Obama trying to help the 2018 Democrats. His carryovers, Comey and Mueller and all these people going after Trump. No one said, this is all for personal gain. It's all to help the Democrats. Adam Schiff's investigation, all to help the Democrats in 2018. No one said that Schiff needed to be impeached. When Schiff's trying to get nudes of Trump from Russians, no one said impeachment. When 3 Democratic senators, Leahy, Menendez, and Durbin, were writing to the Ukraine, trying to get dirt on Trump, no one said impeachment with them. But when it's Trump looking in to the election interference, all of a sudden, that's unacceptable. Is there evidence worth looking into? I'm tired of the hypocrisy. I'm tired of people saying, if you did this, it's a crime if you're Trump. If you're not Trump, then it's not a crime. How about this one? Do you remember, and I told people this, how stupid this was. Do you remember when the Mueller report thing was going and everyone was like, it was obstruction of justice for Trump to even say he wanted to fire Mueller? Right? You remember people were saying that? That was a serious argument they were making. We need to impeach Trump for obstruction of justice because he said he wanted to fire Mueller. Well, did he fire Mueller? No. Well, did Mueller say he hindered his investigation in any way? No, Mueller specifically said my investigation was not hindered. So just the act of saying you want the guy fired is obstruction. Yep. Now, how many Democrats, now that we know that Attorney General Barr is looking in to election interference that benefited the Democrats, how many Democrats like Schiff and Maxine Waters and Pelosi and Schumer have all came out and said Barr shouldn't be allowed to be there. We want him out. He should be impeached or resign. How is that not obstruction of justice? He's looking into crimes that benefited their side. They're saying they want him fired or gone. Same thing Trump did. They're doing it publicly. That's not obstruction. Now, of course it's not obstruction. They should be allowed to say that. But it just proves how stupid and wrong they were, claiming Trump saying he wanted Mueller out was obstruction. Everybody knew it, and they lied. They lied to themselves. I would tell my people that believe this crap, I'd be like, you really don't believe this, do you? You really believe Trump just saying I want Mueller fired? Put yourself in his position. You know you're innocent of the charges. You know that unverified dirt paid for by your opponent was the reason that this got started in the first place. It's been dragging on for 3 years. It's costing you things you wanted to do in your agenda. You know it's all a big garbage witch hunt. Yet the act of you telling people in private, I hate this guy, he should be fired, or tweeting about it, that's a crime in itself. You wouldn't be complaining if someone was investigating you like that? No, that's obstruction. That's obstruction. I said it. I said it then. I was like, wait and see. I was like, because guess what? There's investigations coming down the pipe with the IG. The IG is going to come out and show some really shady crap happening in the intel community. And then if Barr decides to look into this, you're all going to be screaming, Barr's a partisan. He shouldn't be allowed to do this. He should have to recuse himself. He should be fired. No, we wouldn't do that, they said. Or how about this? This is one of my favorites. I'd listen to people tell me over and over and over and over and over and over again. When I would say, biggest political... the day I knew this, it was like sometime in 2017. I wrote a big long thing about it. I said, this is the biggest political scandal in the history of the country. You can get into the specifics, everything you want to do. Just like I just did with the Biden situation, with him getting his son's prosecutor fired. This is all you need to know. An administration of one party used information paid for by that party, dirt sourced from Kremlin officials, to spy on their opponent's party for the accusation of they got dirt from Kremlin officials. Do you hear what I just said? We're accusing Trump of getting dirt from Russians. Therefore, we'll get dirt from Russians we paid for to spy on Trump. That's it. That is the biggest political scandal in the history of the country. Now we find out it wasn't verified. Then we find out that all these people had connections to the State Department, and Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr worked for Fusion GPS. Then we find out with Papadopoulos, looks like MIFSID was probably Western intelligence, which means a Western intelligence person working at the behest of the Obama administration went to a guy named George Papadopoulos and said, hey, Russians have dirt on Hillary. George Papadopoulos gets drunk and tells a Hillary supporter downer in Australia, oh, yeah, I hear that these Russians have dirt on Hillary. And now that's reason to spy on Trump. They gave him the information, and then when he spit it out, right? That's what happened. That's the biggest political scandal in the history of the country. And I was told by people that I thought were intelligent, I knew they didn't like Trump, but that I thought were fair-minded people like, no, this isn't a big deal. Hey, the allegation was so serious, you got to investigate. That's what I was told. What did you want to do? The idea that the Russian government bought and paid for Trump, that needs to be investigated. The allegation was so serious that it warranted an investigation. I said, that's nuts. That's nonsense. I said, if Trump does this in 2020, I believe I specifically said, let's say Cory Booker's the nominee for the Democrats, and Trump pays a law firm to go to China, and they dig up dirt that Booker likes to get peed upon, and a bunch of people working on Booker's campaign went to China, and they're trying to steal the election for the Chinese. Chinese trying to steal the election for Booker. Is that reason for Trump and his administration to be allowed to spy on Cory Booker? You're not going to be screaming that this is ridiculous, that this is authoritarian and abuse of power? Oh, no, I wouldn't be upset. And now the exact people that told me that lie, that I knew were lying right to my face, are flipping out that Trump needs to be impeached. Why? Is Trump's investigation involve dirt that he paid for? Unverified dirt from a foreign government? Is he spying on Biden? Does he have the FBI spying on Biden right now? Is he changing the rules domestically so all the intel agencies get this information now? Is he unmasking people involved in phone calls in the Biden campaign based on this? Is he releasing that to the press, all this information that are then going after him? Is he telling foreign allies that Biden, all the information and the details of this like Obama was about Trump? I don't see any of that. I just see him saying, I would like this looked into. It looks incredibly shady that Biden used $1 billion tax dollars to get this guy fired that was looking into his son. That is impeachment. Trump did it all wrong, right? We should have just listened to them. Pelosi and Schumer and Schiff and MSNBC, Rachel Maddow and, Anderson Cooper and Jake Tapper at CNN. Here's what Trump should have done. Instead of asking the president of Ukraine, Trump should have just hired a Republican law firm, and then they could have hired someone, a French foreign spy. And that French foreign spy could have went to the Ukraine and just paid off a bunch of people to say, hey, Joe Biden was really corrupt. He was getting peed on, and he said that he had to fire the prosecutor looking into his son, and his son was really corrupt. And that would have been it. Then, not only would an FBI investigation would have opened up, but they got to spy on Biden. Then Trump could have released those details to the press. His FBI could have lied and told Biden that he wasn't the target of an investigation, all the while they're meeting him with these salacious details. Then those salacious details that they're telling Biden about, because they told Biden, could be released to the press, and Fox News and Sean Hannity could then start talking about how Biden likes to get peed on, and he's an agent of the Ukrainians, and all this crap. We could have had a 3-year investigation, special counsel. We could have raided Biden's lawyer's office in the middle of the night, right? Anyone associated with Biden could have took down for any crimes. That's how Trump should have done it. That would have been totally legit. Right? Right, Democrats? Right, media? Isn't that what you said? When people like me, why weren't there more people like me? Why is it some fat guy, right, that works 70, 80 hours a week? This isn't my job. I've never got a dime for this. In fact, my entire political, being involved in politics, I did, full disclosure, I used to hand out balloons and stuff at the Republican things at the fair. And before my job interfered, I used to go to the Republican committee meetings. But I've never made a dime. I've spent a ton of money. Why is it me that I had to be saying back then? Why aren't people saying, okay, let's just get it down now? Remember when I was talking about the importance of defining terms? It's not just terms, it's crimes. It's defining what you find acceptable and what you don't. So we should have got him on record. You're saying, right? Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, you're saying if Trump pays a foreign spy to dig up dirt and they come up with accusations from foreign adversaries that people in the Democrats are committing crimes, it is perfectly in the purview of the Trump administration to then use his FBI to spy on that campaign and start an investigation. That's what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say that's another good question. Right? And Jake Tapper, if you watch that interview, the video I did with him and Jim Jordan, Jake Tapper tries to say, well, Trump's kids are making money, but it's different. It's okay to make money. It's even okay to make money off your brand because your dad's president. I don't mind that, right? I don't mind if, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a type of company. A perfume company or something. I don't even know what that, but let's say, you know, Suave hair care products decided, hey, let's get Chelsea Clinton as a spokesman for us, and we're going to pay her $100,000 a year. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem is if Hillary Clinton's the Secretary of State and she's investigating corruption in China, and then her daughter's on an energy board in a company in China. That seems pretty unethical. Now, I talked about this yesterday. You go back and you read the articles from 2-3 weeks ago that are defending Biden, and they all say, all of them will say, Biden didn't do anything wrong, blah, blah, blah. But then they all, see, this is a trick you learn. If you're trying to convince people of things, you want to seem reasonable. And so if you just say, everything my opponent did is garbage, they suck about everything, you seem less reasonable than if you say, the accusation against this person is not true, but I can see how you could be upset about some other things that are less important. It makes you seem reasonable. That's what all of these, it's what PolitiFact did, it's what The Intercept did, it's what CNN did, it's what the New York Times did, it's what the Washington Post did. All of these articles, they all said the exact same thing. Biden didn't do anything bad, but we can admit that it was a conflict of interest at the time in 2016, while he was the point man for the Ukraine and China, for his son to be involved in businesses of people that were accused of being corrupt from those countries. We can admit that was a conflict of interest. They always do that after the fact. Did they admit that in 2016? Was the Washington Post and CNN and the New York Times, were they all saying this? Hey, what's going on here, Obama administration? Now, of course, Obama was scandal-free, remember? They didn't actually want to look into Obama and what he was doing. So now they'll admit. So basically, they've admitted right out of the gate. By the way, we're unethical piece of crap journalists because what we're telling you now, we didn't tell you back then because we're garbage. But now that it can't hurt our team, well, we'll say, because it makes us seem more reasonable. So they all said it was a conflict of interest. This is the people defending Joe Biden saying, yes, the fact that Hunter Biden was on these board of directors from an accused Russian oligarch's company is a conflict of interest. What does that term mean? What is a conflict of interest? And the way I put it yesterday is, it means that your personal situation and what you're supposed to be doing conflict. So take Pete Rose. If Pete Rose is playing and managing for the Cincinnati Reds, and he's betting against the Reds, that's a conflict of interest because his job as manager is to help the Reds win. But his personal benefit would be if the Reds lose. So that means his personal interest is conflicting with what his duties are supposed to be. So if we're admitting it was a conflict of interest, why is that bad? Well, because what's personally beneficial to Biden could be counterintuitive to what his job, i.e. ending corruption, would be in the Ukraine. So how might that manifest? Can you come up with a hypothetical situation? Hypothetically, if it's a conflict of interest, that Joe Biden's son works for what Joe Biden's claiming is a corrupt oligarch, and Joe Biden's trying to get that oligarch to face justice, what's something that could happen that would manifest from that conflict of interest? Anyone? Can you think of something? Let's see if we can think of something. Maybe, what if Biden got the prosecutor looking into that oligarch fired? Well, that would be about the biggest, most blatant manifestation of that conflict of interest that you could see. Oh, wait, that's exactly what happened. I don't know how to make it any more clear than that. We admit that this looks really bad. This was a conflict of interest. But we have no problem with the fact Biden got the prosecutor looking into this fired. Again, the proof is in the results. Maybe you say, well, hey, a bunch of Obama fans in the European Union and then the International Monetary Fund, they all said this prosecutor was corrupt. Now, I know I'm kind of rehashing myself from yesterday, but I don't see people talking about this. I'm not making this up. This is the official story. The official story from the Biden camp and from the media and from the people defending him is, this is, I swear to you, the official story. Look it up. In fact, I will do a video on this at some point by next week, I promise. They all say, actually, Biden, what he did by getting this prosecutor fired, he actually made it more likely that his son would get investigated. In other words, Biden was upset because his son's company wasn't being investigated hard enough. Do you understand how stupid that sounds? Do we expect anyone to honestly believe that? Can you imagine if Trump would have fired Comey and said, look, the reason I'm firing Comey is he's not investigating me hard enough. He's kind of letting my kids off the hook, so let's bring someone in here to make sure my kids are put under the microscope. Can you imagine that? He'd be laughed out of the room. But that's Joe Biden's story. And people take this seriously. It's unbelievable. But let's take it seriously, right? Okay, right? Fine. Let's believe this absurd story. So Joe Biden and the IMF and the European Union, they think that this former president Yanukovych, right? He was the president of Ukraine. He was pro-Russian president. They think that he was corrupt and he had surrounded himself with all these corrupt people, one of which was this guy Zlochevsky. Then there's an overthrow of Yanukovych and Poroshenko's put in. The U.S. helped with this overthrow. What it was we had a Ukrainian government that was sympathetic towards Russia. They get overthrown, and we now have a Ukrainian government that's sympathetic towards the U.S., Obama particularly. Right? So, when the new president comes in, it's like a kind of like a civil war. They want to get that past president. They think he was corrupt, and he probably was, right? Him and all of his cronies were corrupt. So now the new guy that was the direct enemy is going to investigate these corrupt people. And by the way, the new guy's allies in the United States, in the European Union, the International Monetary Fund, they all think Yanukovych and Zlochevsky were corrupt. So Zlochevsky, he owns this big gas company, the biggest one in the Ukraine. He hires Hunter Biden, who has no experience, to be on the board of directors. He's paying him $83,000 a month. Okay? Joe Biden is furious that Zlochevsky's not being investigated properly. The guy's paying his son $83,000 a month. He's furious. So's the European Union. So's the IMF. And so finally they take action. And Joe Biden says, this is ridiculous that my son's company's not being investigated hard enough. Ukraine, we're not going to give you this $1 billion until you get rid of this guy and put someone on the case that will investigate my son and his company. Right? That's the story we're told. And finally the Ukraine says, okay, you win. We'll get rid of this guy. Okay? And then what's nice is the case goes to an interim prosecutor and then it gets kicked to what's called the NABU. The NABU is basically the FBI of the Ukraine. And the NABU would work closely with the Obama administration. In fact, we know this because it's been publicly released that the Obama administration had pressured the NABU to drop cases into prominent Democrats or Democratic donors because they didn't want them to be embarrassed because it might affect the election in 2016. We know this. So, you're Biden. You really want your son investigated. You threatened $1 billion to keep the other guy that wasn't investigating your son, to get him out. Then it goes to the agency that you trust, that you've worked with. These are your buddies. You can trust this agency, right? Finally, you can sleep at night if you're Joe Biden. Finally, I know that my son and his corrupt boss will finally be investigated, right? Thank goodness. They got the $1 billion. Everything's going to work out. These corrupt people are going to be investigated. And, the investigation's just buried. That's the official Biden story. When they tell you, if you have a problem with that, you believe in a conspiracy theory, this has all been debunked. This is literally their official story. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. If Joe Biden was upset that Shokin, even though the case was still open, which we know, he wasn't acting swiftly enough, or he wasn't really doing anything with it, and so he got him fired because they didn't want to give $1 billion to a country that wasn't investigating corruption, then surely in 2017, in January 2017, when the NABU finally buried the case and just made it a tax charge that this corrupt guy Zlochevsky had to pay some taxes, surely Biden and Obama were furious. Right? Surely they'd speak out. Rather, I think that Obama was still in office at this point. But even if he wasn't, they had the right to speak out publicly and say, we gave them this $1 billion contingent on them ending corruption. They didn't. So don't give them any more foreign aid. That's what they would say. That's what the EU would say. That's what the IMF would say. They'd be upset. They were very upset that the previous guy wasn't investigating the corruption. And so when it got kicked to a new agency and they got $1 billion, they'd be upset that that second agency not only didn't investigate, but finally officially buried it. Why didn't anyone speak out? They all knew Zlochevsky was corrupt. They know he still walks a free man today. Why aren't they upset? In fact, now Joe Biden's saying, who wanted Zlochevsky interviewed, wanted him arrested, wanted him investigated. Now Joe Biden's saying, Donald Trump trying to do that, all of a sudden, that's impeachable, that's corruption. But how can that be? Joe Biden wanted his son investigated. He wanted the company investigated. That's why he got that other prosecutor fired. So why doesn't he want him investigated now? What could it be? I wonder. Maybe, and just hear me out, this sounds really freaking crazy, right? But maybe Joe Biden didn't want his son investigated. No! Maybe all those allies of Obama and the IMF, like Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, that's quoted as saying this guy was corrupt, who went to George Soros' wedding, or the Atlantic Council, who's quoted as saying this guy's corrupt, who's financed by George Soros' Open Society Foundation. Maybe they were just globalists that were on board with the Obama administration. Now, what story makes more sense to you? That a man wanted his son investigated harder, withheld $1 billion to make sure that a real prosecutor got in there that would actually look at his son, and then when that prosecutor buried the case, he just said, I changed my mind. Or that prosecutor had a chance of looking into his son, and he got him fired because of it, and kicked to an agency that he knew had buried cases for him in the past, and then that's exactly what they did, was bury the case. Now, maybe you're not convinced. You might say, okay, Rob, well, one, you might just be a liar and say that the first story makes more sense. If so, you're a liar. But maybe you say, okay, maybe you think your version makes more sense, but that's not proof. And you're right, it's not proof. But it's reason to investigate. And if there's reason to investigate, then that means several things. One, it means there's no impeachment case against Trump. Because he has every right as the president, as the person who's supposed to enforce the laws, to make sure that massive corruption was not occurring at the executive branch in the previous administration. That would include election interference from the Ukraine to benefit Hillary Clinton, which they admitted to. Let me show you something. I did a video on this. In fact, bear with me for a second. Let's just do the whole thing. I still type like one finger method. I'm terrible. I'm not going to be able to find the video I want to show you all. Well, I can't find it. You'll just have to take my word for this, but I assure you this happened. So Katie Tur's interviewing someone, and they say, well, we know for a fact that the Ukrainians did interfere. They admitted to interfering to help Hillary Clinton's campaign in the 2016 election. She says that's Russian propaganda. Now let's go back to the defining, right? Let's clearly define what is the terms. Let's clearly define what is a crime and what's not. Let's clearly define what is corrupt and what's not, right? Is it corrupt to have foreign governments working to help one candidate, release dirt to help one candidate or another in an election? The Democrats say yes. That's what the 3-year investigation into Trump was about. Even when they couldn't find collusion, what do they repeat verbatim? Over and over. They say, everyone says that the Mueller investigation was a waste of time. They say it was a waste of time, but that's garbage. Look at how many people were indicted. It's proved that there was systemic interference by the Russians, and that's a huge deal. They affected our elections. That's right. That's what they say. That's what we're told over and over. Now, never mind the fact that there were 2 examples of interference, and I'm not convinced either were proven. The first has been disproven in effect, which was that Russian trolls used Facebook and Pokemon Go and Twitter to put crazy memes online, which helped steal the election. Somehow that was more effective than 95% of the mainstream media and billions of dollars in advertising buys. That's what they want you to believe. Never mind that most of those memes and tweets weren't seen until after the election. Never mind that many of them were pro-Black Lives Matter or pro-gay rights. But that was a huge deal. We had to have meetings at Capitol Hill. Mueller talked about it. They had to be indicted, this and that and the other. Only a federal judge came out here about 3 months ago and said, hey, Bob Mueller, you can no longer say these people were acting at the behest of Putin because you have zero proof of that. Zero. Whoops! There's number one. But that's how, the same Democrats that call you racist and xenophobic. See, to a Democrat, if a Russian does something, Russians aren't people like me than you, right? You could do so. For example, a Democrat could go out there and do something and they'd say, I hate Trump. That's not Trump doing it. It was me, right? We give that to Americans. We'd give that to people in the UK, but not the Russians. If you're a Russian individual, then you're just an automaton. You just do what Putin tells you. You're just a puppet of Putin. You can't be an individual. That's the party that wants to scream racism and xenophobia. That's what they believe. Turns out, no evidence whatsoever that this was a government operation. It just so happened it was Russian individuals that didn't like Hillary. Now, could they have been operating at the behest of Putin? Possibly. I don't have proof they weren't, but that's not the job of prosecutors. The job is to prove that they did do something, and they have no proof to the point where a judge said you legally can't say this anymore. Well, there's 50% of Russian interference down the drain, and the other was that they hacked these emails of a server that the FBI was never allowed to look at, that they had to get the information from CrowdStrike, which CrowdStrike redacted some of the information. The same CrowdStrike that was paid for by the DNC, that has that's CEOs on the Atlantic Council that's paid for by George Soros, that said 2 months after that Russia did the DNC hack, that it did the Ukrainian hack, only the Ukraine government came out and said, no, you're wrong, and CrowdStrike had to apologize. But we have to take their word. In the biggest, we're told this was an act of war by what Russia did. But we couldn't even have official U.S. agents look at the server. Had to be this DNC paid firm. They wouldn't have an incentive. And yes, just ignore that they blame Russia and Ukraine and they were wrong about that. We have to take their word here. Sorry, I don't see the proof. I don't care. That's it. That's the entire proof we have. Now, I want you to weigh that. But regardless, right? Okay. That's reason for the foaming at the mouth and the hyperventilating and this is proven. Mueller proved the investigation, Mueller's investigation. We have to get to the bottom of election interference. That's interfering. Oh my God, it's the biggest deal in the world. It's taking down democracy. Election interference is terrible. We have to investigate it. Ukraine's leaders campaign against pro-Putin Trump. Financial Times. Is that a pro-Trump? Is that InfoWars? Is it Sputnik, the Russia sort? No, that's a mainstream American publication, Financial Times. This is from August 28th, 2016. And you say, wait a minute, Rob, a couple months before the election? Yep. Okay, let's see what these Ukrainians are doing. A couple months before the election, we're finding out. For years, Sergei Leshchenko, a top Ukrainian anti-corruption campaigner, worked to expose kleptocracy under former President Yanukovych. Now he's focusing on a new perceived pro-Russian threat to the Ukraine, U.S. candidate Donald Trump. The prospect of Mr. Trump, who has praised Ukraine's arch-enemy Vladimir Putin, becoming leader of the country's biggest ally, has spurred not just Leshchenko, but Kiev's wider political leadership to do something they have never attempted before: intervene, however indirectly, in a U.S. election. Do you see what that just said? Let me read that again. The prospect of Trump, who has praised Putin, becoming the leader of Ukraine's biggest ally, has spurred not just Leshchenko, but Kiev's wider political leadership to intervene in the U.S. election. This is from 2 months before the election. Admitted in the mainstream media of the United States. That's weird. Did you hear anyone freaking out? Did you hear the CNNs of the world, or the Adam Schiffs, or the Chuck Schumers, or the Nancy Pelosi's, or the Dianne Feinsteins, the Anderson Coopers, the Rachel Maddows? Admitted. Where are they? I thought election interference was a big deal. Let's keep reading. Well, maybe. Is there proof? Does this article have proof? Let's see. Mr. Leshchenko and Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Bureau published a secret ledger this month that authorities claim show millions of dollars of off-the-book cash payments to Manafort, Trump's campaign manager. Manafort vigorously denies wrongdoing, subsequently resigned from his role. But Mr. Leshchenko and other political actors in Kiev say they will continue their efforts to prevent a candidate who recently suggested Russia might keep Crimea, which was annexed 2 years ago, from reaching the summit of American political power. Here's Mr. Leshchenko's words himself. A Trump presidency would change the pro-Ukrainian agenda in American foreign policy, Mr. Leshchenko, an investigative journalist turned MP, told Financial Times. For me, it was important to show not only the corruption aspect, but that he is a pro-Russian candidate who could break the geopolitical balance in the world. Admitting that he did it. Now, we just had a 3-year investigation into Trump and into Russia because the idea that they interfered in the election was so severe it was considered an act of war. And now, when Trump's trying to investigate Ukrainian meddling that benefited Hillary, that's impeachment. The same media that every day, the same Democrats that every day for 3 years said, Russians interfered. They did it to help Trump. Can you believe Trump willfully accepted Russian help? Oh, he's such a terrible, corrupt person. Oh, it's so bad. Obama's out there going to all these agencies in the world, going to the UK, going to Australia, getting dirt from Kremlin officials, talking to a former British spy, talking to the Ukraine, getting dirt on Trump, getting evidence on Trump. But it was okay because he's investigating a crime. Right? That was fine. No one had a problem with Obama doing that. The media didn't care. The Democrats didn't care. They said it was a serious investigation. In fact, when Trump was saying that he wanted that investigation to stop, they said that was impeachable. That's obstruction of justice. Now we have the Ukraine. Did anybody in Russia admit to interfering in the election? Anyone? Nope, they didn't admit. Here we have an admission from Ukrainian officials. So you would at least expect as serious of an investigation. The Trump investigation was all started by Garbage Steal dossier and George Papadopoulos' drunk conversation. This would be started by a Ukrainian official admitting to the mainstream media in the United States, yes, me and other officials will continue to meddle. We don't want Trump. We don't like his policies. Where's the investigation? Where's the screens for election interference? So when they're investigating Trump for 3 years using foreign evidence, that's perfectly acceptable. They say that's important to make sure no crimes went involved in election interference and Trump wasn't involved in any way. When Trump complains about it, they say that's obstruction of justice. It means he should be removed from office. Now, when we have admitted election interference from the Ukraine, and the Democrats complain about the interference, is that obstruction of justice by the Democrats? Nope. In fact, it's a crime now for Trump to investigate that. Do you see how that works? We can investigate Trump for the very same crime we know happened with us. With Trump, if he complains about the investigation, remove him from office. With us, if Trump tries an investigation, remove him from office. Let's go on here with this article. Have you heard anyone talk? Now, I see people reporting the 2017 PolitiFact article, right? This actually has the guy that's interfering admitting me and my friends are interfering. I haven't seen anyone bring up this article. Mr. Trump's rise has led to a new cleavage in Ukraine's political establishment. Hillary Clinton, the Democratic nominee, is backed by the pro-Western government that took power after Yanukovych was ousted by street protests. The Yanukovych camp publicly supports sharply diminished, leans towards Trump. If the Republican candidate loses in November, some observers suggest Kiev's action may have played a small role. Ukraine's anti-corruption activists have probably just saved the Western world, said Anton Chekhovtsov, a Western-based academic, especially in Russia, Ukraine, tweeted after Manafort resigned. Adrian Karatnicki? Adrian Karatnicki, a senior fellow at Washington Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council. Where'd we've heard that again? Oh yeah, that's the same group that said Shokin was guilty, that's paid for by George Soros, that CrowdStrike's on. Isn't that weird how they pop up in all these articles? By the way, the same Atlantic Council that paid for the trip that Adam Schiff's staffer took in August of 28th to visit the Ukraine. Isn't that weird how they're all involved in this? A senior fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank said, it's no wonder some Ukrainian political figures are getting involved to an unprecedented degree in trying to weaken the Trump bandwagon. Kiev moved beyond verbal criticism when Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau and Mr. Lyshenko, who has a reputation for being close to the Bureau, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, you know where you've heard that before? This is the same agency that's investigating Biden's son after Biden had the prosecutor fired. Them and Mr. Lyshenko, who has a reputation for being close to the Bureau, published the ledger showing payments to Manafort. So the same agency that's now investigating Biden's son is the ones that are admitting to interfering in the election to help Hillary. Though most Ukrainians are disillusioned with the country's current leadership for stalled reforms and lackluster anti-corruption effort, Mr. Lyshenko said events of the past years had locked Ukraine onto a pro-Western course. The majority of Ukraine's politicians, he added, are, quote, on Hillary Clinton's side. The media and the Democrats are telling you that it's a conspiracy theory that Ukraine interfered in the 2016 election. The Ukrainian government officials are admitting, yes, we did it. And the media and the Democrats in this country are saying that that's a conspiracy theory. Trump trying to investigate that admitted election interference is considered impeachable. I don't know what more to say. The average person doesn't know this. I try my best. I think I make it as clear as possible. But, I reach 40 people. Why isn't this Financial Times? Financial Times! This isn't Alex Jones. This isn't InfoWars. It's not even Fox or Hannity. It's the Financial Times. It's a quote from this guy, Lyshenko. Let me tell you a little more about Lyshenko, and you've probably heard me say this if you watched any of my videos recently. Lyshenko was the same guy. If you go back and you look up all the articles that say, Ukrainian officials say Biden was a prerequisite to the call. Let me see if I can find it. This is the media, right? Let me see if I can find this. Ooh. We got maybe some new news happening here. Let me see. One second. I know this is boring, me looking stuff up. Here's CBS News. You can look. Axios, ABC, they all say the same thing. Here we go. Let me bring this up for you. Right? I just showed you who Lyshenko was, right? The guy who admitted to intervening to help. Trump wanted compromising information on Biden, former Ukrainian lawmaker says. Just so you know, this was edited. It used to not say former. It said Ukrainian lawmaker. Who could this lawmaker been? A former member of the Ukrainian parliament and advisor to Ukraine's president told CBS News it was a well-known fact that Donald Trump wanted compromising info on Biden. Sergei Lyshenko added the Ukraine's president knew that U.S. aid to his country was at stake. I'm sure that the issue of Biden was forever on the table between Zelensky and Trump, added Lyshenko. Huh. Wait a minute. This is CBS, right? CBS was concerned. What about ABC? Who'd they use? Let's see here. Who'd they use? Former Ukrainian advisor. Who'd they use to say this? Oh, correction. Earlier verticals incorrectly said Lyshenko as a current advisor. Whoops. Lyshenko's their source too? Huh. Wait a minute. Now correct me if I'm wrong, you out there watching me. ABC, CBS, what about Axios? Who did Axios use? I wonder, who did they have? Ex-advisor says Biden case was preconditioned. Sergei Lyshenko? Wait a minute, what about the Business Insider? Who did they use? UK officials say Trump, okay, an official says Biden was a prerequisite. Who did they use? Sergei Lyshenko? Huh. What about the Hill? Who did they use? Sergei Lyshenko? Daily Mail? Lyshenko? The Guardian? Lyshenko? Now wait, correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't ABC and Axios and Business Insider and The Guardian and all these places, I could have swore that they said foreign election interference was a big deal. I thought they said that. So isn't it odd that when it can then be used to hurt Trump, the guy who admitted to election interference, not only are they interviewing him like his opinion matters, they don't even mention that he admitted to election interference. How is that possible? How could you consider yourself a credible media outlet? That's the end of the discussion. CBS and ABC and Axios and Business Insider, they're all crap. So when they sit there and they tell you, oh, this is a big impeachment, this is a sad day for the country. The Constitution, and we have to keep our elections safe, and Trump's trying to get interference in the 2020 election. This is a sad day. These are serious allegations. Dude, you're interviewing the guy who admitted to interfering in the 2016 election like he's some kind of credible source, and you buried the story. It's unbelievable. It's the same group. John Solomon comes out with all these bombshells. Shokin, the fire prosecutor, signs an affidavit saying that he was forced out because he was looking into Biden's son. Biden's son's company, Burisma, their defense attorney, John Beretta, tells the interim prosecutor, Biden was wrong. This guy's not corrupt. He spread disinformation. All the evidence of the payments we have. Litsenko, the former prosecutor, admitting, I never got to look into these payments. The former president of the Ukraine from like 2 ago saying, I don't see evidence that Biden's guilty, but there should be an investigation. All of this evidence. And it's answered by just saying, yeah, it's a conspiracy theory. We debunked it. Proof from Ukrainian officials announcing to the mainstream media in the United States, we are currently, this is during the election, we are currently interfering in your election. More than just words, we're releasing dirt. And we're going to continue to do so because we hate Donald Trump's policies. We think he'd be an ally of Russia. And we're backing Hillary Clinton. That's a conspiracy theory that's been debunked. So much so that they can interview the guy who admitted that to the mainstream media as if he's an impartial source. I just don't need... And then they'll cite these polls. Oh, 53% of people are for an impeachment inquiry. Because they listen to the media. Because they don't hear people like me. Show them that Financial Times article. Here's a Financial Times article. Here's Trump's transcript, right? Financial Times article is them admitting we interfered in your election. Trump transcript's telling the new president, I want you to look into who interfered in our election. Now, is that still impeachable? It just blows my mind. Why isn't Rudy Giuliani have this Financial Times article tattooed on his arm every time? Here's what Lyshenko said. Here's what the Ukrainian officials said. Jake Tapper or Anderson Cooper or whoever. Why do they let him get away with this crap and framing the debate? So, I don't know. It frustrates the crap out of me, but that's about all the time I have for tonight. I have to go pick my wife up at work, so... but I'm going to have a good weekend. I do not know if I'll be able to put videos up the rest of the week, but I'll try my best. I would encourage all of you to be putting out your own material. Let me put the link to this Financial Times. Anytime you're in an argument with someone online on Twitter or something. Here's the article. Show them yourself. I got a video up on it. I don't care if you use my video. You make your own video, But just get this info out there. It's important because it is, as we go, they're becoming more and more desperate. They realize their corruption. And look, this isn't just about the Democrats or about Biden, right? Yeah, I'll call her. It's not just about them. The media that said this was debunked, this is nonsense, that will then have to come out with egg on their face and say, oh, well, maybe it wasn't nonsense and we had the story completely wrong and tried to bury it. It's about all of them, so... All right, I got to get moving, but thank you so much, everyone. Please share my videos if you don't mind. I know these ones are tough, 3.5-hour video. Don't eat babies, no matter how much you're concerned about the environment. Try not to sniff people's hair. That's bad, too. So thank you, everyone, and have a good one.